Chapter 41, Leighton versus Smaug. Azog! Smaug's roar tore through the halls of the Lonely Mountain, the first time the dragon had left his lair in over a century. Azog had predicted that if any of the invading human soldiers escaped the mountain, Smaug would go after them first. He'd left a few trembling orc slaves in the outer hall as a distraction while hiding the bulk of his army in the palace's darker corners. Smaug hardly glanced at the quivering orcs. His fire swept over them, leaving smoked, blackened corpses. "You cannot escape, humans. I smell dwarven blood on you," he thundered, and charged for the mountain gate. The Lonely Mountain shook as Smaug burst free. His wings unfurled, and the palace's stone pillars snapped like twigs. Granite pedestals cracked. Half the great gate flew into the air, breaking into a million fragments in the winds driven by his wings. The carved reliefs of dwarf kings on the rock were gouged by 5 fang-deep grooves. Thrain's statues shattered and crumbled. From deep within the mountain came successive muffled thuds as the vaults collapsed. The dwarf horde cascaded down like a metallic avalanche, gold and jewels pouring out of the mountain's belly and slowly overflowing the ruined gate as if the mountain itself bled treasure. Smaug swept through the clouds, shredding them with his claws. From River Valley Town, the dwarves watched in horrified awe as the dragon burst free. The sound of Smaug's approach revived the old fears that had haunted the dwarves for generations. Spears and battle axes trembled in hands. Ori's shield clanged off the ground, drawing Dori and Nori's attention. The fallen shield reflected the diving silhouette of the dragon. Balin felt panic rising like bile. Smaug's dive toward River Valley Town was the same as in the stories, unchanged in his memory. Images of melted armor, carbonized beards, and screams solidified in dragonfire and turned into cold sweat on Balin's back. Smaug flew low over the ruined streets, savoring the terror below, and roared again. The sound hammered into Thorin's skull. Over it he heard the cries of dwarves, voices not of those standing beside him now, but the ghosts of kin who had perished in dragonfire 171 years before. Thorin clamped his hands over his ears. Blood trickled from his ear canals, and his eyes were rimmed in red. The hallucinated screams overlapped with Smaug's present roar, an icicle through his spine. "Smaug!" Thorin roared, pushing himself up. The shell-forged axe in his hand frosted as an icy mist poured off the blade. Smaug rose again, but his second dive did not target the dwarves this time. His eye was on a banner, the red lion that matched the armor of the offending humans. Radon's standard now flew from a tower in River Valley Town. Smaug hovered, neck arched, magma-like light pooling beneath his scales. Thorin knew that posture too well. That build-up meant a blast that would turn men to ash. No, Thorin surged forward, intending to throw himself between the dragon and the Red Lion Legion, to use the freezing axe to cloak them in a curtain of ice and block the dragonfire. He did not care if the heat evaporated him, nor whether Azog watched the spectacle. The blood debt of 171 years boiled in his veins. Now Smaug was striking at his friend's army. He would plunge his axe, given to him by Tarnis, into the dragon's eye if he must. Dane reacted fast. He grabbed Thorin's waist armor with his hammer and barked, "Are you mad, Thorin?" "Yup, that's Smaug." Feely and Keely, shaken from their panic, gripped their uncle. When Thorin turned his head, all could see the tear tracks on his face, tears of rage running hot through his bearded cheeks. He said hoarsely, "Precisely because it is Smaug, it must be ended by the bloodline of Durin." Smaug's breath came down. An orange-red lance of flame shot toward the Red Lion Legion. The dragon expected the human wails, but at the last moment the flames bent, twisted by a purple gravitational field, and dissipated. In Smaug's widened gold eyes, a strange, golden-lioned figure rose from the earth. The commotion at the Lonely Mountain had been visible even from Lake Town. Tarns had already received Radon's message and, knowing Azog's treacherous timing, was speeding to River Valley Town with Gandalf and Bilbo. Thorin had left earlier when Tarns had written to Thranduil to tell him his son was in Lake Town. Gandalf watched Smaug's arrogant silhouette with a grave face, fingers hidden under his gray robe, clenching his staff. "The noise Smaug's making is livelier than a dwarf feast," Gandalf said. "Are you sure Radon can stand against him?" Tarns, riding Torre, didn't turn. "If you still have time for metaphors, then you already know the answer." Gandalf cleared his throat. I merely wished to be sure. Tarnis exhaled. I was sure, but you brought Bilbo, and now I'm not. This is a war between dwarves and a dragon, and orcs. Lake Town has been ravaged. I'm allied with Thorin and them. Bilbo Baggins has no reason to be involved. Gandalf looked at Bilbo, who sat before the saddle in his arms. He insisted on coming to River Valley Town rather than staying behind in Lake Town. Bilbo, still trembling from seeing the dragon, spoke quickly. No, I do have a reason. I signed Thorin's contract, remember? And I had a feeling he and the expedition might need me. Gandalf gave Tarns a look that said exactly that. Tarnis was about to answer when Bilbo suddenly stood on tiptoe in the saddle, startling Gandalf into steadying him. Bilbo's pupils reflected a black tide surging from the mountain's mouth. It's orcs, Bilbo shouted. So many trolls. Azog's taking advantage. And there are things flying out of the mountain too. Bats. We must hurry to River Valley Town to warn Thorin and Tarn's men. Gandalf calmed him, pressing Bilbo back into the saddle. Calm down, Mr. Baggins. Smaug's fury is the real danger. We're too conspicuous. I know, Bilbo said, but Thorin and the others are on the front line, and Azog has somehow got a whole army of bats. Just bats in the sky? Tarn said. Don't worry, Bilbo. With Radin here, nothing flies without his leave. Tarns did speed his mount. High above them, Smaug watched the human who had climbed to his height. The dragon had never seen a flying man of such massive bearing and grew curious. He opened his maw to speak, perhaps to surprise his opponent with flame once he got close. As the stranger neared, Smaug's words cut off when a violet gravity field suddenly lashed at his wings. The dragon's wings were restrained as if some invisible hand pinned them. Radon, hovering with a look that seemed to ask, "Are you an idiot?" raised both hands. Smaug's vast body stalled in the air. His wings beat in fury, but could not break free. The dragon plummeted toward the barren ground outside Lake Town, roaring in disbelief. Boom. Smaug crashed, shaking the earth. Radon, in the sky, frowned and thought, this gravity's odd in this world. This dragon ought to have been crushed under its own weight. On the ground, Smaug groaned. His wings were twisted and broken, but his limbs and head were still able. He had lost flight, but he was not yet down for the count. This is impossible, Smaug bellowed, anger laced with shock. He tried to rise again, but the pain and the strange gravity made even lifting his head an effort. Radon descended, hovering within reach of the dragon's lowered head. Calmly, he drew the star-scourged greatsword from his waist. Welcome to the ground, lizard, he said. Smaug's panic vanished like a mist. His head snapped up, and a long brewing inferno shot at Radon. Heat rolled his cloak. Radon crossed the star-scourge in front of him and flared his own purple gravity magic. Smaug's right side collapsed 3 meters as if crushed by an invisible weight. His body tilted, and the blast slashed past Radon. Using the gravity pressing on him, Smaug lashed his long, whip-like tail from the left at the human. Radon snorted and slashed downward. The clash of sword and tail rang out, and Radon was thrown back dozens of meters by the force, though his blade carved a bone-deep wound into Smaug's scaly tail. The dragon did not roar in pain this time. After driving Radon away with his tail, Smaug lunged, teeth bared to bite the unsteady man. Gravity again pushed his head down. His fangs scraped Radon's breastplate and sparks flew. Smaug tried to use dragon speech to unsettle Radon, to cloud his thoughts. The wounded tail swept with suffocating power, but Radon countered. Rocks broke from the ground, floated as if obedient to him, and he molded them into a raining meteor shower with his gravity field. The stone storm hurled at the dragon. Smaug blasted the stones with dragon fire. The breath met stone and blew up into dozens of midair fireballs. On River Valley Town's walls, Millicent watched the duel with a solemn face. She had stayed in the town instead of returning to Lake Town with Tarns, and seeing Radon and Smaug locked in combat made her fingers itch to cross the parapet and join the fight. Freya, also watching, stopped her. Millicent stared at Radon's guard in surprise and demanded, "Why are you holding me back?" A muffled voice under Freya's lion-helmed visor said, "Because the general doesn't need pity. He said he would face the dragon himself." Chapter 142. The general offensive begins. Morg, Orishi! Attack! All forces attack! Azog stood on an intact tower wall of the Lonely Mountain Palace, arms spread wide as he bellowed orders to his orc army. Horns blared, dull and relentless. The dense horde, long hidden within the mountain, poured from every gate and corridor like a tide of black beetles and surged toward River Valley Town. The humans and dwarves there saw them coming. Geryon ordered the Red Lion Legion to battle stations, while Thorin, steadier now, climbed the hastily erected parapets of River Valley Town with Dane at his side. The orc host spread across the waste between the lonely mountain and River Valley Town in solid ranks. Row upon row of large orcs in heavy, near-full-body armor carried long spears and iron-forged shields. This force, better equipped than any Azog had shown before, was clearly a hidden trump card, intended to surprise any dwarf who still underestimated orc strength. A meddlesome human wizard had disrupted Azog's plans earlier, forcing him to reveal this army sooner than he wanted. Flanking the disciplined core were wargs and lesser orcs in crude leather and rusted cleavers, snarling and hurling themselves forward. As the orcs spilled from the mountain, the bright sky darkened with clouds that had not been there moments before. Trolls shoved aside the rubble, blocking the mountain gates, and thundered forward. Over a dozen Olog trolls, limbs turned into crude weapons and their vision partially blinded, came out of the main gate with orc handlers riding their backs. The first reply from River Valley Town came from the trebuchets behind its walls. Red Lion flame jugs arced on burning trails, slammed into the orc lines and detonated, shredding nearby fighters and sending tongues of fire through the ranks. Second echelon, switch to granite. Geryon's voice carried along the battlements. A messenger blew the horn. 8 heavy trebuchets released their winches at once. Half-ton boulders thundered down onto the orcs, splattering black blood and flattening charging warg riders where they fell. The sound of grinding gears answered from within the orc formation. 6 Olog trolls roared forward, their broad backs bearing crude catapults. The trolls half-crouched, and the orcs on their backs leapt down to operate the machines. With rough sneers, they began flinging granite back at River Valley Town. Stone blocks the size of buckets smashed into the old town walls, tearing battlements apart and sending shards flying as deadly projectiles. 3 Latan soldiers were caught unready. 2 slapped up their brass shields in time to take the blows, metal ringing and denting, but the third was struck in the waist. His spine shattered and his body burst into a spray of blood. One boulder crushed a trebuchet that was loading, the winch and twisted timbers sheared like a nut being cracked. Its wreckage crushed nearby flame jugs, and 2 Latan soldiers were instantly enveloped in flames. Another boulder hit a stone house beside a trebuchet. The falling wall snapped ropes, and a winch shot free, striking a dwarf and tearing half his face away. Geryon slashed a chunk of flying rubble with his flame-shaped greatsword and shouted, "Aim for the beasts carrying the catapults." But the Olog trolls moved faster than he'd expected. The Red Lion Legion's stones could only plow into empty ground now, while the trolls kept just beyond the ballista's effective range. The orc riders maintained a deliberately vague distance, preventing Geryon from ordering the ballistas to fire without risking friendly casualties. The trebuchets were becoming sitting ducks. Arrows and bolts peppered the orc cannon fodder as they rushed to set up ladders, while ballistas and bows on the walls sought to thin the tide. Still, the trolls and wargs closed relentlessly. Geryon wrestled with the problem when Freya's voice cut through the clamor. "Is this how Lord Geryon got all that white hair? Worrying so much?" She teased. She kicked an orc trying to climb the wall and toppled its ladder, sending the climbers crashing down with panicked shrieks. Her greatsword still dripped black orc blood, proof she had fought her way along the parapet to Geryon's side. He pried a hooked ladder free with his sword and shot back. "Then tell me, what's your plan for those moving catapults?" Freya smacked her chest and said, "Simple. Give me 20 Red Lion Knights and I'll rip those things apart." 20 knights, essentially the whole contingent Tarns had summoned. Geryon didn't hesitate. "Approved," he said. "No fuss. Good." Freya grinned. "You've been holed up in Redmane Castle too long, Lord Geryon. You forgot how the Red Lion Legion fights." She strode off and had a messenger sound the horn to gather the knights. The dwarves were feeling the pressure from the Olog Troll's stone catapults as much as anyone. Dane dodged a shard of rubble, then lunged out and smashed his warhammer into the head of an orc that had just come up. He noticed commotion where Freya gathered her force and found Thorin hacking at an orc with his frozen shell axe. "Heads up, Tarns's friends are mustering a mounted countercharge," Dane said. "Our war goat knights are just standing around. Why not send them with the Red Lion Knights to help clear those catapults?" Thorin swung his axe down, the icy blade rending an orc open, and nodded at once. "Good," he shouted across the wall. "Fili, Kili, take the war goat knights and follow Tarns's cavalry." Fili and Kili rallied the war goats. Freya had already led the Red Lion Knights out of the gate, leaving the young dwarf brothers with a complex mix of eagerness and worry. Kili frowned. "The gate's closed behind us. We can't go out that way." Fili scanned the battlefield and pointed to a weaker sector in the orc assault. "Then we'll jump down from the wall. War goats aren't like horses. They can clamber." The Red Lion Knights thundered out through the open gate, their horses' iron shoes sparking on the road. Freya rode at the spearhead, greatsword sweeping in a horizontal arc that cleaved two trolls attempting to bar the way. Their bodies crashed back into orcs and wargs, opening a path for the knights behind her. Freya and her unit charged a nearby Olog troll hauling a catapult. The orc operator on its back was levering the machine when a gravity arrow from a Red Lion Knight tore him apart. "Cut the legs!" Freya roared, drowned by the troll's bellow. Her warhorse reared. Her sword sliced the monster's left knee tendon. The giant buckled. Two knights drove their broad-headed spears into the catapult's frame, wedging it loose, then wheeled their mounts and rode away as the twisted timber collapsed. On the wall, Fili and Kili tightened their reins and sent hundreds of war goats launching over the crenellations like a thunderous cascade. They dropped from near vertical heights, hooves slamming onto the orcs who'd been climbing the walls. "Let your dwarf grandpas use you as stepping stones," Kili crowed. The war goat knights crushed helmets and skulls. Orc brains splattered across the rock face in a grisly spray. The goats' horns impaled any who reached to grasp them. By the time the last dwarf landed, a 3-meter heap of orc corpses had collected at the base of the wall. "Support the allies," Fili shouted, steering his goat toward the Red Lion Knights. The war goat knights punched through enemy lines like living wedges, horns and iron-plated hooves still slick with blood. 2 Olog trolls bearing catapults were now surrounded by the Red Lion Knights. Fili rode up to Freya and hollered, "The one on the left is ours." Freya didn't hesitate. She ordered the Red Lion Knights to give their left to the dwarves and concentrate on sealing off the right. Fili drove his goat in. The beast prayers transformed its claws into deadly rakes that sliced an Olog troll's ankle. Kili, in perfect timing, slammed conjured boulders into its knee. The troll pitched forward. Riders were flung into the dirt and crushed under charging hooves. Fili scrambled up the troll's back, plunged his longsword into its skull, and the monster went limp. He dropped back to his goat and rode away. When the last Olog troll and its catapult were bisected by Freya's greatsword, the town's own trebuchets resumed their suppressive fire, and the surrounding orc ranks began to break and fall back. Thorin watched Fili and Kili from the wall, tense until he saw they were unhurt, then let himself exhale. Dane, smashing orc heads as he spoke, said, "If they worry you so much, don't send Fili and Kili out." Thorin shook his head. They could not stand by and watch friends fight and bleed while they stayed safe. Freya rode back up to the dwarves, smiling under her helmet. "Not bad at all. You two used beast prayers, didn't you? I saw a bit of Bernal in your moves. Interested in joining the Red Lion Legion?" Fili and Kili exchanged glances. Kili looked tempted. Fili demurred. "We haven't yet mastered everything Tarnans and Master Bernal taught us." "Huh, Tarnans has pupils?" Freya clicked her tongue. Then, remembering she was speaking to them, she cleared her throat. "The Legion's gates are always open. General Radon would be glad to have warriors like you. Come whenever you change your mind." Fili did not refuse outright this time. He only nodded. Then a mournful horn sounded faintly from the lonely mountain. Black smoke rose from within its gates, and the ground trembled as thousands of orcs moved in coordination. Azog's elite force was advancing. From the mountain's dark throat, an eruption of bats burst into the sky, a black torrent of wings that coalesced into a rolling cloud. "Oh, come on. Is Azog a beast tamer now?" Kili shouted, eyes wide. "Trolls and goblins are one thing, but where did he get all those bats?" Freya tugged her horse about and barked at the dwarves. Save the jokes. Get back inside River Valley Town. Azog's just served up the real trouble. Chapter 143. Ringwraiths Attack Lake Town. Just as the orc army surged out of the lonely mountain like a tide under Azog's roar, dark, ink-black clouds churned over Lake Town. The last rays of daylight were swallowed. The whole settlement fell into a viscous gloom, and even the ripples on the lake turned a leaden gray. Bernal's hand tightened on his knight's greatsword until the veins stood out on the back of it as he heard faint, scattered sounds of something moving across roof tiles from every direction. "Light the fires," he shouted. As Bernal instinctively began the prayer's golden tree vow, Egon's roar from the watchtower cut the deadly silence. Dozens of torches flared almost at once, their orange-red tongues piercing the gloom and revealing terrifying silhouettes clinging to the walls and roofs. Spider-like masses the size of carriages hung upside down on the outer walls, their jointed legs encrusted with bits of decaying grass. More poured out from the darkness beyond the torchlight, their compound eyes glinting cold, eerie green under the flames. Bernal finished his prayers, and a golden glow surrounded him and the storm soldiers beside him. "We have guests," he barked. "We are the masters of Lake Town. Let us give them a proper welcome." The giant spiders of 8 jointed legs scraped across the tiles with a grinding sound that set teeth on edge as they lunged at the storm soldiers below. The soldiers formed a shield wall, long spears thrust out like thorns between the gaps. When a spider hit a shield, a spear from behind would pierce its abdomen, and foul, green venom would spatter over the leather, hissing and smoking as it ate at the hide. Legolas and Toriel moved like moons across the roofs, light-footed. Arrows whistled, finding the compound eyes of one spider after another and sending them hissing into the cold water beside the houses. Egon's arrows supported the small, desperate skirmishes, saving several storm soldiers who had been caught off guard. Toriel landed silently beside Bernal and shot down a spider that had tried to ambush him. "Tell your men to beware of the abdomen," she said quietly. "They spin webs there, and they store venom. Aim for the eyes or the mandibles. Those are their weak points." Bernal relayed her words loudly. The storm soldiers passed the warning along. Another spider climbed the wall with silent speed. Toriel drew her short knife, and like a silver snake, she severed the joints of its legs, rendering it useless. Its body lay twitching on the tiles, only able to open and shut its mouthparts in fury. "Or you can cut off their legs like that," she added. Bernal raised an eyebrow, drove the tip of his greatsword into the spider's skull, and said, "It's still easier to lop off their heads." Legolas landed at that moment, his face drawn. "Toriel, something's wrong," he said. "There's something odd about these spiders, but I can't put my finger on it." Toriel looked up at the brooding sky. "It's those black clouds," she agreed. "When these spiders were active in Mirkwood, there were never clouds like this." Bernal frowned. "No, the clouds aren't the main thing. It's what's hiding in the dark, using them. I have the feeling something, some creature, is watching from the shadows. That sense of being watched won't leave me." Before he could finish, a piercing scream cut to the marrow. It came from the dock. A storm soldier's throat was slit by a blade. A spray of blood misted his companion. Heavy iron boots thundered across the planks from all directions. 9 shadowy figures emerged from the dark curtain, clad in twisted black iron. Glimpses of inhuman wails came from beneath hollow visors. The storm soldiers facing them seemed to seize up with an invisible paralysis, then erupted into terrified screams and fled in panic. Large spiders pounced, and men who had been fighting fell, silenced. Legolas's pupils narrowed. "The Nazgul," he hissed. He loosed an arrow, but the moment it left the string, a ringwraith raised a hand and crushed the shaft. The broken arrow flew back and impaled a panicked soldier. Toriel's face tightened. "Be careful. The Nazgul are the Dark Lord's greatest servants. Mortals cannot touch them. Their breath is poisonous, and their screams sow fear and despair." Those soldiers dropped into terror because of their cries. A ringwraith with a black longsword ghosted across the darkness and leapt onto a rooftop. It screamed as it plunged toward a storm knight below, the tip of its evil blade carrying a putrid, cold wind aimed at the gap in the knight's armor. Metal, clang, and the sound made ears ache. To the ringwraith's surprise, The Storm Knight did not panic. He parried with practiced skill. For the first time, a soldier saw the enemy. A 2-meter-tall, void-cloaked humanoid in iron armor, black mist churning beneath its visor. Runes etched on the breastplate oozed what looked like dark, viscous blood. "What is that?" one man breathed. The knight's counterswing skimmed the ringwraith's breastplate and only sent pale sparks from the iron. The ringwraith seemed unaffected and drove its blade toward the knight's heart. The soldier spun and parried just in time. Then he shouted, "Careful! Normal weapons don't hurt them." Bernal's face hardened. More dark figures slipped from eaves and alleys and even from piles of corpses. As they passed, soldiers fell. Some struck through the chest found their blows had no effect, as if they had hit smoke, and died anyway. Panic spread. Only the Storm Knights from the lands between, stalwarts who resisted the Wraith's influence, held the line. Bernal leapt from the city wall into the melee, his greatsword catching the black mace of a ringwraith and saving a panicked soldier. He dropped to one knee, his free hand lighting with golden power, and he cast Golden Tree's blessing. The golden radiance washed over him and the nearby men, clearing fear and despair from their hearts for a few precious moments. The light stung the ringwraith's senses. One raised a hand to shield its visor. The freed soldiers thrust their spears and swords into the ringwraith's empty heads, but the blows drew only keening screams. They did no harm. Bernal spotted a ringwraith floating toward the watchtower where Egon stood and chopped its arm back. "Egon, below you! A ringwraith's coming!" he shouted. Egon had been using Dragon Communion, the clawing spell, to tear apart spiders that had climbed the tower. He glanced down to see a blade almost at his face. He lifted his great bow, made of dragon bone, and blocked. The blade scored the bow, leaving a shallow mark though the string held. Egon then kicked the wraith off the tower, and his boot should have broken ribs, but the blow only dented the armor a little. The ringwraith floated away as if nothing had happened. Exasperated, Egon raised his longsword and muttered, "What the hell are these things?" Bernal's situation worsened. The first ringwraith's scream seemed to summon reinforcements. 4 more drifted into the fight. The golden light that had dispelled fear had also marked Bernal as a threat. Seeing more wraiths, Bernal barked to the Storm Knights and soldiers who wanted to help. "Pull back and deal with the spiders. Leave these to me." An instant later, something sliced the canvas awning of a nearby house to ribbons. Bernal dodged as sword wind rushed past. The Storm Knights reluctantly led their men away. Ordinary soldiers lingering would only impede Bernal. He rolled to avoid a flaming longsword sweep and hurled his greatsword at a dagger-wielding ringwraith. The blade embedded in the armor, pinning the wraith to the wall for a moment. Another wraith, wielding a heavy iron hammer and larger than the others, roared and brought the haft down toward Bernal. Bernal sprang to one hand, while a world-devouring scepter materialized in the other. He slammed it into the ground. A red vortex leapt from its tip and tugged at the hammer-wielding wraith, distorting its armor and unbalancing it. Under the pressure of 5 ringwraiths circling him, Bernal gripped the scepter and fought on. But the scepter's battle skill gave him no feedback, no siphoned strength, suggesting the foes might not be living at all. Even facing Black Knife assassins, Bernal had never felt so baffled. The hammer-wielding ringwraith's roar attracted another companion. Bernal found himself surrounded by 6, floating in a ring, blocking every route of escape. "Creatures of darkness," Legolas cried from above. 2 arrows, the sound of them like sharp notes, pierced a ringwraith's hollow helmet and elicited a pained scream. Legolas's silver hair flickered in torchlight, but his quiver was empty. Still, his shots had bought them something. "Toriel," he called. Toriel dove from the roof. Her arrows were gone as well, but she plunged a silver blade into the seam of a dagger-wielding ringwraith's armor. The blade ground in like sandpaper. The wraith gave a rasping roar. She followed with a flying kick that sent the wraith reeling, its helmet clanging off stone. Bernal glanced at the remaining 4 wraiths and allowed a grim smile. "Excellent. 1 against 4, he said, and hefted the world-devouring scepter over his shoulder and charged. "How do you kill these things?" he shouted to the elves. Legolas dodged a strike and answered, "Weapons blessed by the elves of the First Age can harm them." Bernal swung the scepter and sent 2 wraiths flying, but a crushing blow from the hammer-wielding wraith struck his back and staggered him. Right, great. Where do I get one of those? Can you bless one here and now? Toriel, slammed back by a flying kick and landing near Bernal, coughed and spat blood. She managed to reply through the pain. There's another way. Destroy the armor they wear. That will send them back, temporarily, to their master. Chapter 144. Bernal. On the watchtower of Laketown, Egon grimaced as he used his dragonbone greatbow to fend off the ringwraith attacking him. The watchtower was narrow, more symbolic than practical, so his movement was severely restricted. The ringwraith ignored the terrain, attacking from every angle and never allowing Egon to switch to a melee weapon. He was forced to keep his greatbow up, parrying stabbing blades again and again. His back slammed into the wooden baffle, and the ringwraith's longsword sliced toward his face. Egon held the dragonbone greatbow horizontally to take the blow. Sparks flew where the black blade struck the hard bone. Damn it, is it endless? He growled. He kicked the ringwraith out of the watchtower, but it floated there like before, shook its black-armored body, and raised its sword to strike again. At that moment, Bernal's roar reached him from below. Egon, are you alive? If so, hurry up and help. Bernal's own battlefield was no easier. Though Legolas and Toriel had drawn the attention of 2 ringwraiths, reinforcements had come from other parts of Laketown. Even Bernal, beset by so many ringwraiths, felt the pressure. The world-devouring scepter could not draw stamina from these undead. Along with the ringwraiths, great spiders sprayed webs across Laketown, and an orc army joined the assault. The Storm Knights noticed these orcs fought in formation, unlike Azog's ragged hordes, so the knights led their men to hold the line against the hybrid attack of spiders and orcs. Outnumbered, they couldn't spare the hands to help Bernal, and the storm soldiers were vulnerable to the ringwraith's shrieks. Moving to Bernal's aid would only be counterproductive. That was why Bernal had shouted up to Egon. Egon heard him, and after dodging another stab, cursed back, "Don't rush me. This thing is a pain. Can't kill it, and it floats everywhere." As he replied, the ringwraith in the cramped tower shifted and slashed again. This time, Egon didn't dodge or block with the greatbow. He lunged forward, jamming the bow into the sword's guard, the protruding handguard below the hilt, then kicked the ringwraith in the knee so hard it dropped to one knee. He stamped down on its helmet, pinning it to the wooden floor, and cackled hoarsely. "Finally caught you." A flash of red appeared in his other hand. The ringwraith released its sword. The gauntlet on its hand became a spike aimed for Egon's thigh. The watchtower's roof was shattered in an instant by a colossal dragon head that had materialized above them. The dragon's roar exploded outward. The air warped invisible ripples from the sonic blast. Glass in nearby houses shattered, shards scattering like ice. The ringwraith nearest the roar took the worst of it. The iron breastplate Sauron had forged for it cracked inch by inch, black smoke pouring from the fissures. The sound wave tore the armor apart like transparent teeth gnawing at a spirit. For the first time, a jumbled human voice spilled from beneath the faceplate, hoarse like rusty gears. "Impossible." The ringwraith tried to break free, but its intangible spirit body, ordinarily able to withdraw to its master when the armor fell, suffered damage from the roar. Pain, the wraith had not felt in ages, made it scream and wail. A second dragon roar followed, and the spirit body flickered into view within the sound waves, a withered, emaciated human frame being ripped apart bit by bit. Each sliver that peeled away released a shriek like glass on stone. When Egon's Dragon Communion incantation ended, the ringwraith's spirit was gone, and its armor collapsed like a sandcastle. Iron boots, knee plates, and a breastplate clattered to the floor, and a silver-white thumb ring rolled from the wreckage. Egon picked it up. The ring was set with a large, ornate gem in which a tiny Eye of Sauron pattern swam. He closed his hand, tucked the ring into his bosom, and decided to take it to Tarn's for study. The eye made his skin crawl. He then sneered at the ruined armor. "So you things are afraid of dragon roars. Egon, you done?" Bernal shouted again. Panting, Egon called down, "Done. I took care of one ringwraith. Use prayers, Bernal. These things can be hurt by prayers." Instead of gratitude, a louder burst of swearing came back. "Damn it, I figured that out a few minutes ago. I told you to come help me, not to lecture me. Do I look like I have time to cast prayers? Pick up your greatbow and shoot." Egon blinked and took a better look at Bernal's situation. Bernal was fighting 5, no 6, ringwraiths at once. Toriel had tried to interfere with the dagger-wielding wraith, but had been badly beaten and would add trouble whenever she reacted. 6 different blades came at Bernal from all directions. The shrieks of their steel merged into a single, venomous sound, like 6 snakes striking for his throat, heart, and joints at once. "A little crowded," Bernal muttered. He grinned, leaned back, and when a sword grazed his nose, he slammed the world-devouring scepter hard into the floor. A red flash burst out and sent the 2 nearest ringwraiths stumbling. Bernal used the opening to spin and slip through the gap in their encirclement. Where he had stood, a heavy hammer smashed the pier into splinters. Before the dust settled, 2 more attacks converged to cut his neck off, but Bernal was unmoved. He sidestepped the leftward blade, rammed his shoulder guard into the opponent's chest, and kicked the ringwraith on his right away. Using the recoil, he flipped out of the ring of weapons, only to be met by 5 shadowy figures leaping up like festering sores. Their net of blades closed tight again. The floating wooden floor of Lake Town cracked under Bernal's stomps. Like a rampaging beast, he plowed through the wooden wall of a house and, amid flying splinters, swept his scepter to deflect 2 pursuing blades. "Be careful," Toriel cried. Before her plea finished, the dagger-wielding ringwraith burst into the house from another side, its blade aimed for Bernal's ribs as he slammed into the structure. Bernal spun in midair in a near-superhuman twist, embracing the blade so the dagger punched a large hole through the wall with spiderweb cracks around it. The ringwraith still had its hand stuck in the wood when Bernal's scepter followed his spin and smashed the wraith's shoulder guard. Outside, the iron armor of 3 ringwraiths glimmered with an oily light. One lifted its boot. The planks beneath it groaned like a dying thing. Then the bowstring twanged. A copper arrow the thickness of a wrist tore through the air and drove into the chest plate of the last standing ringwraith, as though a hungry dragon had struck. The bolt's momentum carried it through. It skewered 2 more ringwraiths in front of it, pinning them like grotesque hawthorns to a half-rotted floating stake. 3 iron suits convulsed on the deck, unable to free themselves. Seizing the chance, Egon loosed a volley that pinned the armors to the floor. Toriel, blood-smeared and panting, emerged from the dagger-wrought breach and, swinging her twin silver blades, helped Bernal parry another black longsword. With 4 fewer attackers bearing down, Bernal faced the 3 ringwraiths still in the house and flashed a dangerous grin. Far away, Freya and the Red Lion Knights, and Fili and Kili with the War Goat Knights, had just finished dealing with the 6 troublesome Olog trolls. Their cheers in River Valley Town hadn't yet faded when countless black dots erupted from within the lonely mountain. They spilled like ink that instantly condensed into a rolling black cloud, a vast swarm of bats blotting the sky. Each bat had a wingspan as wide as a dwarf and hissed at the humans and dwarves below. Ori's axe rang against the battlement, and he stepped back, eyes wide. This many bats! How did Azog hide these things? The aged Balin gripped Ori's shoulder guard, his white beard fluffing in the breeze. "Stand firm, Ori. Do not let fear take hold. We have Thorin, Tarns and his allies, and even Gandalf." Thorin stood nearby, leaning on his frozen shell axe, silent as a statue, watching the sky. The refugees from Lake Town inside River Valley Town looked up at the descending swarm, fear tightened their faces as the bats' buzz grew closer. As panic began to spread, Bard's voice cut through the noise. "Anyone who can shoot, pick up a bow. Light your arrows." The crowd froze. Bard snatched a bow, lit an arrow from a brazier, and fired into the thunderhead of wings. The flaming shot sliced the low sky. The swarm scattered instinctively, but one bat was struck and plummeted, flames trailing as it hit the ground. The crashing creature and the flare of fire broke the building panic. Bard swept his gaze over the gathered people and shouted, "See? They fear fire. Just as we fear hunger. These beasts may blot out the sun, but they cannot smother the courage our ancestors used to fish through the ice." The crowd rallied. Fishermen who couldn't shoot well wrapped tarred burlap around arrow shafts. Those who could draw a bow, however clumsily, under Bard's command, fired into the bat cloud as an act of resistance. Freya, who had just returned to River Valley and climbed the wall, heard Bard, and looked over with a small smile. "There are more heroes in this world than I thought," she told Jerian beside her. "Those dwarven brothers, and that human leader." Jerian didn't crack a smile. "Planning to enlist them all in the Red Lion Legion?" Freya nodded. "Of course. The Red Lion Legion loves the brave. General Radon will admire them." Fili and Kili, who had climbed with her, were not amused. "Now is not the time for recruitment or compliments," Kili said anxiously. "What about the bats? We can't fight the sky and Azog's forces at once." Freya's face shifted, then brightened. "Oh, don't worry, brave dwarf who knows beast prayers. With General Radon here, nothing flies through his battlefield." Radon, who had been locked in battle with Smaug, had already seen the swarm. As the bats edged toward River Valley Town, he parried a gout of dragonfire and made a grasping motion toward the mass. Purple light burst from his palm, and ripples of gravity swept through the bat cloud like a giant net. The sky-obscuring swarm froze as if suspended in amber. Even the beating of wings fell silent. In the next heartbeat, countless bats dropped like iron weights, their wing bones snapping as they struck the earth, fangs and bodies thudding into mud and raising choking plumes of dust. Chapter 145, Jungle Support. Chapter 145, Support from the Woodland Realm. Laketown's streets were smeared with black blood and laced with spider silk. After Bernal, Egon, and Legolas had lured 8 of the ringwraiths north of town to the ruined bell tower, all the shadows of the place seemed to gather around those collapsed stones. On the rubble, the Angmar Witch King stood, his Morgul blade hanging low, black mist curling behind the pale mask like Sauron's sneer. Around him, a tide of Uruk-hai crashed again and again against the Storm Legion's last defenses. These Uruk-hai were not the small, stunted orcs under Azog, but the taller, harder-boned troops of Sauron himself, Uruk-hai with long arms and shields painted with red eyes. The front ranks swung spiked clubs that thudded against Laketown's wooden barricades. Behind the barricades, storm soldiers, led by their storm knights, calmly leveled hand crossbows at the endless press of Uruk-hai and the great spiders crawling over the roofs. Their counterattack was fierce, but it could not stop the sheer weight of the assault. Their front lines were forced to give ground, inch by painful inch. When a dozen Uruk-hai finally fell, the wooden barricades on a street broke. Uruk-hai stepped over the still-warm bodies and surged in, straight into the Storm Legion's flamethrower arrays. Blazing tongues of fire consumed dozens, dying screams cut the air. Some burning Uruk-hai flung themselves into the cold canal, and with no dwarf allies to dam the waterways, nor townsfolk to block the channels, those that survived the flames simply vanished into the water. Worse, great spiders dropped from eaves and climbed roofs, spitting tangles of silk. 3 storm soldiers near a flamethrower were wrapped in pale cocoons, their glassy green eyes reflecting their last struggles. Other soldiers swung flamethrowers upward and immolated the ambushing spiders. Following the Storm Knight's commands, a wall of fire rose, Uruk-hai corpses, burning planks, slowing the enemy's advance. A murky, indifferent laughter rose through the flames. A black figure stepped out as if through mist. The Witch King strode through the blaze as if it did not touch him. A deathly chill flowed from him, and the flames behind him dimmed enough for Uruk-hai to pass. A Storm Knight barked, "Shield bearers, right! Hold the breach!" The storm soldiers raised their shields as Uruk-hai and spiders poured through the breach. 5 nearby Storm Knights roared and charged at once, halberds and greatswords crackling with stormlight. They did not believe they could kill a being like this with steel alone, but they knew they could not allow him to break the line or inspire fear among the troops. 2 sword and shield knights drove him toward a narrow alley, while 3 halberdiers hammered at the joints of his armor. The Witch King swung his Morgul blade. The shockwave splintered the wooden wall. A halberd rang harmlessly off thick plate. One Storm Knight took a brutal stab from the Morgul blade. The soul-piercing pain struck him like a blow to the head, but he did not back away. Spitting black blood, he dropped his greatsword, seized the Witch King's wrist with both hands, and shoved his own body against the blade. "The seams are under the armpit. Stab his damn armpit," he croaked. The other 4 knights lunged at the trapped arm. They fought like cornered beasts, trading blood for position to keep the Witch King from turning and shrieking over the ranks. Down the wider street, the storm soldiers' line had shrunk into the market area. Arrows ricocheted off brass shields, but sticky spider silk proved the worst hazard. Shields stuck fast in the threads, and men had to let go or be swallowed by more silk. "Look out! Ignite the oil," a storm knight shouted. He kicked a lunging spider free and pointed at stacked barrels used for the flamethrowers. Torches were thrown. The barrels detonated in a blast that hurled Uruk-hai and spiders into the air. Charred limbs rained down. The smoke hid more enemies pressing forward, and the line reformed over broken bodies. Spears thrust through gaps to pierce a spider's head, no aim at the bloated abdomen, as the storm soldiers had learned from the elves. Pierce the skull. Do not risk the venom. "How much longer until Lord Bernal arrives?" their commander muttered, glancing toward the ruins where Bernal and his companions had drawn the ring-wraiths. Only the drum beats of the Uruk-hai and the rasping of spider mandibles answered. The despair lasted only a moment. From the northwest, the whine of arrows cut through the chaos. A silver storm of shafts hammered into the last Uruk-hai, riddled the compound eyes of rooftop spiders, and embedded in the wooden planks a few steps before the storm soldiers. The fletchings barely trembled. Those in front had been struck down. Thranduil's white stag leapt into the fray with lithe grace, antlers cracking a pouncing spider into pieces. Behind the king, a tide of woodland elves in golden armor flowed through the streets. Their short bows made sieves of the spiders on the roofs. Their scimitars reaped the Uruk-hai like crescent moons, aiming for armor seams. The Storm Legion seized the chance. With elves cutting off the rear and rooftops, the soldiers charged, flanking the enemy and crushing them between blade and arrow. The Witch King, still entangled with the 5 knights in the alley, glanced up at the unexpected elves and bared his blank, misted face like a question. His master's army was bleeding away. Uruk-hai fell under the arrow storm before they reached the elves. Nimble scimitars split spider bellies in shreds. With a single sweeping strike, the Witch King forced the knights back, then raised his head and shrieked toward the sky. The sound carried like cold iron. At that shriek, the remaining Uruk-hai and spiders fled Lake Town in a wild surge. The 7 ring-wraiths who had been fighting Bernal, Egon, and Legolas froze at the Witch King's cry. Their forms melted like smoke and streamed back to their lord. Toriel, whose strength was less than the others, was struck down midway through the fight, felled unconscious by a tall ring-wraith wielding a heavy hammer. The ring-wraith armors showed dents and tears that told how costly their struggle had been. Bernal, now under less immediate pressure, took the chance to invoke the Golden Tree prayers, Golden Tree's blessing, and Golden Tree's oath. The prayers bolstered Egon and Legolas. Their weapons could finally hurt the ring-wraiths. Had Bernal the leisure, he mused, he could have used the world-devouring scepter to shatter their plates one by one, if they were not so troublesome. 7 black mists swept the streets, but the last of them stalled when 2 arrows, Egon's heavy shaft and Legolas's thin, gold-flecked flight, pierced a ring-wraith's knee and the gap at his neck. The pause was all Bernal needed. With a crash, he brought the world-devouring scepter down onto the pinned figure. "Open your mouth, close your eyes, cover your ears." Bernal barked at Legolas. The elf prince obeyed on instinct. Egon's dragon roar filled the plaza in the next breath, and even Bernal grimaced, clapping one hand to his ear. The pinned ring-wraith writhed under the roar. Its armor twisted and cracked, flaked away like rusted iron, and as it shrieked, the thing inside collapsed into a heap of scrap. From the ruin rolled a silver-white signet ring. Bernal picked it up and turned it over. Egon laughed. "This one's a little different from the one I picked up earlier." Bernal slipped the ring into his pocket. "They must matter," he said. "When Tarns and his men finish at the Lonely Mountain, we'll show them. Maybe Gandalf will know what they are." Legolas, still dazed from Egon's dragon roar, had missed the exact moments of their exchange. Bernal felt the eyes of the Witch King on him and looked up. On distant rooftops, the Witch King and the remaining 6 ring-wraiths hovered, watching. Bernal kicked the scrap of armor at his feet and aimed the world-devouring scepter at them with a flourish. "Go tell your master his servant's armor isn't strong enough," he taunted. The Witch King's head tilted, the mask shuddered with black mist, and then they were gone, drifting back toward the north. Only a bitter voice echoed from the ruins. This is merely the prelude. Human. They left because the ringwraiths were surrounded by storm soldiers and woodland elves. To stay was to be cut off. Where they had been standing a moment before, several precise arrows thudded into the wood. On a distant rooftop, an elf pulled an arrow free and sighed. Thranduil patted his stag's mane and swept his eyes over the wrecked town. His warriors moved in ordered waves with the Storm Legion, clearing pockets of enemy so cleanly that their golden mail stayed unstained. The king scanned the battlefield for one face among many, his son. Bernal and his companions joined Thranduil. When the elf king saw his son's disheveled state, a flash of fatherly worry eased from his silver-gray eyes. Then he resumed his usual hauteur. From within his cloak he drew a letter and handed it to Bernal and Egon. "Tell Tarnans," he said, voice cool, "in gratitude for his gift has seen to this mess." Chapter 146, The End of Smaug. When the Angmar Witch King fled, sunlight poured back over Lake Town. Bernal recognized the letter Thranduil held as one sent by Tarns and understood why Woodland Realm aid had arrived so swiftly. Legolas's expression tightened when he saw the letter, but he said nothing. He sheathed his silver dagger, its blade nicked from the struggle with the ringwraiths, and hurried off to find Toriel, who had been knocked unconscious after flying into a timber house during the fight. Thranduil's eyes stayed on his son. He wanted to speak, to hold him back, but his throat tightened and no words came. Bernal and Egon read the silence for what it was, a private thing between father and son, and neither man, never having been a father, attempted to intrude. Bernal understood that Thranduil's concern was for Legolas's wounds, so he cleared his throat and said to the Elven King, "Lake Town needs me to take charge of the situation. I won't keep you." Then he pulled Egon and left quickly. Thranduil remained composed and patient. Once Bernal and Egon were out of sight, he dismounted and hurried after Legolas. As they went, Bernal and Egon heard a desperate, raw roar carry in from the direction of River Valley Town. It was not the controlled roar Egon had produced with his Dragon Communion ritual earlier. This was filled with the despair of a beast facing death. Nearby, the titanic duel between Radon and Smaug had reached its climax. Smaug, battered and desperate, beat its malformed wings to whip up a storm, filth and snow thrown high into the air to blind Radon's view. It hurled its fire again at the airborne human who had plagued it. Radon's lion-headed armor was scorched, his cape reduced to ash, the golden pauldrons burned red and sizzling against his skin. He spat blood, set his star-scourged greatswords across his chest to steady himself, and let purple gravity ripples flow along the blades to send Smaug's flames back into the sky. "So you'll ground me," Smaug sneered, "but the size and strength gap can't be bridged. Flee, insect. Crawl back into your hole like those dwarves." Smaug's taunt coincided with a lash of its tail, heavy as a steel whip. Radon surged forward, gravity magic detonating from his sword hilt and showering the battlefield with shattered stone. He leapt onto the thicker part of the tail and drove a star scourge into the gaps between scales. Smaug howled and rolled, hurling Radon toward the earth. He broke his fall with gravity, though his back cracked against the ground. He rose, planted his boots, and launched himself back up, blade aimed at the dragon's eye. A claw shot out, 5 blade-like talons seizing one star scourge and swinging both Radon and the sword into the air. The other claw came down to strike. Purple gravity flared across the descending talon, accelerating it, barely missing Radon. The ground crumpled under Smaug's strike. With his other hand, Radon slashed at the claw. When steel met scale, he poured his gravity into the sword. There was a sickening crack. The dragon's talon shattered. Smaug screamed, and Radon seized his chance to break free, though his right arm was badly burned by the dragon's lingering heat. The air smelled of char and blood. Radon stumbled but righted himself, breath heavy, golden eyes fixed on the wounded beast below. Smaug was vast, over 100 meters, so even without dragon lightning, it was a terrifying foe. That size alone made it dangerous, and Radon felt an exhilaration he had not known in years. "You are the only human to put me into such disarray," he told the dragon. "Tell me your name, and I will remember it." Smaug, clinging to its old habits, tried to bind the human with draconic speech, hoping to enslave his soul through distraction. It already felt the tug of retreat. This human was too perilous. But Radon did not answer. He rose again, star scourges ready, and flew toward the dragon. Smaug spewed flame, not a column this time, but a wide wall intended to blind. From above, Radon's sharp eyes narrowed. Coins and gems that had always been embedded in Smaug's chest had been jarred free by the battle, exposing a raw, unarmored wound, the old fatal wound a brave warrior had pierced long ago and then covered with the mountain's treasure. Radon saw it and knew in an instant. This was the weak place. "I've found your weakness, lizard," he roared. He rarely shouted. He holstered the immediate all-or-nothing cry and cupped his hands. A dark gravity vortex formed, and the tumbled stones rose into the air, snuffing the dragonfire. Smaug had forgotten that while its wall of flame hid Radon's form, it also blinded its own view. Panic crept into the beast's mind. It flapped madly, trying to lift itself, but gravity pinned it down. "You ant! How dare you!" Smaug began, but its final breath of fire was shoved back into its throat by Radon's full-force gravity. The flames flooded the dragon's maw, throttling it. Radon arrived at the exposed chest, both star scourges raised. Gravity coiled around the blades. The air seemed to wail, as if the stars were being dragged down. "You look down on our kind," Radon thought, seeing Smaug's pupils widen with fear for the first time. With a brutal downward sweep, he tore the gap in the scales wider with gravity, pierced the exposed flesh beneath, and drove the hot blade into the dragon's heart. The heart burst beneath the edge. Smaug's roar became a death rattle. Smaug's thrashing shook the earth. Its tail struck Radon's waist and abdomen. The sound of armor crumpling and ribs breaking was sickening. Then Smaug's eyes dulled. Its tail slid from Radon's grasp and lay limp in the dust. When the smoke settled, the dragon's carcass rested in the shallow pit it had made, blood pooling red and hot. Radon sat on Smaug's closed jaws, one star scourge buried deeply in the dragon's skull, following the seams between scales, no chance for it to feign death. Dragons in this world might still have strange vitality, better to be sure. His breastplate was bent out of shape, his left arm burned to the bone, but his right hand still gripped the other greatsword. "This is the first and last time I'll indulge my pride," he panted. "Let the Red Lion Legion's name for slaying dragons spread through the lands. Let the human kingdoms reconsider the power and standing of the Golden Tree territory. I risked everything to fight this monster, and it shall not be in vain." He breathed heavily and cast his gaze toward River Valley Town, where Tarns stood. "Tarns, Elden Lord," he murmured to himself, thinking of command and how to use a weapon to show strength to allies. It was the kind of political calculus a commander could not escape. Brandishing a divine blade, or not, could make or break a nation's voice. At that same moment in River Valley Town, Thorin, grinding at Azog's front lines, made a decision of his own. Tarnas had intended to let Radon handle Smaug quickly, but Freya and Jerian had begged Tarns to give the general his chance, and Tarns reluctantly allowed it. He told Jerian and Freya firmly, "I'm not against Radon dueling the dragon. Under ordinary circumstances, I would welcome it. I am a warrior too, but this is war, and dueling is reckless. Radon is crucial. We cannot afford to lose him. If he falters, I will join the fight between him and Smaug, no matter your protests." Jerian agreed quickly. "No problem. General Radon made the same point." Tarnas blinked. "He said the same thing?" Jerian nodded. "Yes." Millicent nodded as well, helpless. "They made similar pleas to me when they tried to stop me from helping Radon." Tarnas frowned. If Radon himself had acknowledged the foolishness of a commander dueling a dragon, then his choice to engage must have been calculated, not mere bravado. But Bilbo's sudden arrival forced Tarns to shelve that thought. The hobbit rushed up, breathless. "We must go stop Thorin. He plans to take the dwarves with him to the lonely mountain to behead Azog. Gandalf is nearly fighting him." Tarnis felt a headache coming on. Both Radon and Thorin were making impossible demands at the worst possible time. "Millicent," he said, "stay and watch Radon. Judge for yourself if he needs support. I leave it to you." Millicent met Tarna's gaze and nodded, solemn. "I will." When Tarns reached Thorin's side, the dwarf king was fully armed, astride a war goat, glaring at Gandalf, who stood in his path. Beside Thorin were Fili and Kili and the core companions from the Lonely Mountain expedition, Balin, Dwalin, Gloin, every dwarf but Bombur, who stood by a horn as big as he was, waiting for Thorin's command to sound the call. "Azog's defeat is nearly assured," Gandalf said, anger clear in his voice. And yet you insist on risking yourself, Thorin Oakenshield. Thorin, stubborn as ever, shot back. And if Azog escapes, shall we wait decades for him to heal and return to strike our house again? This is a once-in-a-lifetime chance to cut off his head. You're stopping me, Gandalf. Tarn stepped forward. Gandalf is right. Even if I consent to your plan, Thorin, you don't have enough men. At Tarn's arrival, Thorin's expression softened, but stubbornness remained. I know you're worried, Tarns, but Azog, his hands are stained with Durin blood. He must die here, at the Lonely Mountain, by my hand. I cannot draw more soldiers with me. Doing so would thin our force in River Valley Town and jeopardize the Red Lion Legion's strategy. He paused, then added, Besides, your general is challenging a dragon, no? Tarns inhaled and looked at Gandalf. We've long known Dwarves' obstinacy. Why don't you and I go with Thorin and bring him back when he tries to throw his life away? Gandalf tapped his staff on the ground. His white horse trotted to his side. He shot Thorin a stern look, then said to Tarns with grim humor, I'll listen to you, for now. Once we drag this stubborn ass back to his yard, I will make Thrain himself a subject of dwarven song for his son's pig-headedness. Chapter 147, The Death of Azog. No sooner had Gandalf finished speaking than Smaug's dying shriek rolled over the battlefield. Millicent moved to Tarns' side, glanced toward Thorin and the others, and said quietly, Smaug is dead. General Radon has won. Her voice was low, but the news carried through the stunned hush that followed the dragon's roar. Thorin brightened and turned to Fili and the other dwarves behind him. Azog's greatest ally is dead. Today, we will use his blood to honor our fallen. He looked back at Tarns, impatient. Tarnas, do you still think this beheading operation will be for nothing? Tarnas relaxed and shrugged. The plan changes. Prepare to cut the weeds and pull up the roots. He nodded at Millicent. Since Radon has dealt with Smaug, you don't have to stand guard any longer. Come with us and help Thorin take Azog down. Millicent smiled and inclined her head. Of course. Bilbo, who had been nervously watching them, hesitated and then looked up at Gandalf, his voice barely audible but deliberately clear. Perhaps. I should see the end of this journey with my own eyes. Please, take me. Gandalf stroked his beard, about to answer, when Thorin acted. He drove his war-goat forward and clapped Bilbo on the shoulder, laughing. Bilbo, you always said you'd write a book about this journey. You are already part of the tale. When you dip your quill, add these words. Thorin Oakenshield slays Azog within the Lonely Mountain. He gave Bombur a look. Bombur understood, inhaled like a bellows, and blew his horn until it trembled on the air. The sound shook the town, and Thorin shouted to Fili and the others as they surged out of River Valley Town like arrows from a bow. Tarns glanced at Gandalf and Bilbo, looped Torides' reins twice around his hand, and told them, I'll wait for you to catch up, then led Millicent out of the town. Gandalf had said nothing, so Bilbo peered out, and before he could think better of it, Gandalf lifted him onto his horse. The wizard's voice was half exasperated and half amused. I rather regret letting you come all this way, Mr. Baggins. I don't know when you learned to be so stubbornly dwarven. On the slopes of the Lonely Mountain, Azog's eyes narrowed as he watched the smoking ruin of Smaug collapse. For a moment he could not believe the dragon had died so far from his reach. As Smaug's body smashed into the earth, Azog gripped his warg's reins until his knuckles cracked. Panic flashed in his face, but he tempered it quickly. The orcs around him did not notice. Then he saw a small mixed cavalry, humans and dwarves, push out of River Valley Town through the smoke. Catapults and ballistae from the town supported them, and a brilliant blue beam lanced from their center. Where the beam passed, snow vaporized and the ground split. Orcs and wargs disintegrated in the light. Azog's pupils pinched. The wizard Gandalf was with that force. He knew his orcs could not stand against such power. Full effort to block, he began, but forced himself to stop. Ordering his troops to confront the wizard would only expose his position and reveal his desperation. He needed a plan to escape. Half a minute later, he had one. He barked orders to an orc messenger. All of you, retreat to the Lonely Mountain and defend the Great Hall to the death. The messenger left at once. Then Azog turned to another orc, his snout twisting with false sympathy. Do you want to live? The orc stammered, frightened. I will not flee, master. Azog kicked him. Coward, I asked if you want to live. Yes, the orc sputtered. Azog helped him up with a grin that was almost kind. Good. Go find the wargs. Take a white warg as your mount and lead my elite warg riders out from the west side of the Lonely Mountain. Leave now. The messenger hesitated, confused. But master, did you not just order us to hold to the death? Fools. They must hold so we can slip away while everyone's distracted, Azog snarled. Move or I'll toss you off the mountain. The messenger fled. Rah. Azog watched him go, then looked out over the battlefield. The orcs had seen Smaug fall and then received Azog's order to retreat. Panic spread like wildfire. Soldiers who had been well-equipped now jostled and struck at one another to be first. Some, unable to get back to the mountain in time, fled in other directions. Exactly what Azog wanted. Chaos. Even if the orcs had withdrawn in order, the battle was lost. If the field was a mess, Tarns and Thorin charging in would be diverted by scattered groups and confusion, giving Azog a chance to slip away. He ground his teeth, promising himself, when darkness covers the Lonely Mountain again, I will brew mead from your skulls and sew banners from your skin. You will beg me for the mercy of death. Then he turned and strode into the mountain. The fleeing orcs and the warg riders from the west were bait, meant to buy him time. Thorin's frozen shell axe stopped a mass of panicked orcs that had flooded into the cavalry's path. He urged his mount on. Tarns, the battlefield's a mess. Can you use that glintstone magic again? Tarns nodded. I can, but only once more. That'll do, Thorin grinned. Tarns unleashed Comet Azur. The spell streaked straight ahead, obliterating the fleeing orcs in a clean line. Nearby orcs threw down armor and weapons and fled in terror. The road's clear, speed up! Thorin urged, and the war goat surged forward. Fili and the others matched him, and Gandalf, grim-faced, urged his horse to catch up. Tarnas, with Millicent at his back, was alongside Thorin in moments. This retreat order was clearly from Azog, Tarnas called. He's using the scattered orcs to slow us. But he won't just give a single order. Look at the orcs on the mountain walls. They mean to defend the hall to the death. Keely's sharp voice rose from ahead. Look, on the west side, a band of warg riders is slipping out. Bilbo, perched behind Gandalf, looked up. Yes, there's a squad of wargs. One's white. A white warg? Thorin's face hardened. Azog's mount. He'd never hide in the mountain and not plan this. He's used the Lonely Mountains army as cover. Turn, pursue him. Wargs are no match for our goats on this terrain. But neither Gandalf nor Tarns wheeled. Thorin checked with them. Tarns frowned. Azog is cunning. Would he escape in such a showy way and risk being seen? Gandalf nodded without speaking. Thorin's eagerness dimmed, but anxiety remained. If Azog is counting on us to overthink and let him get away, we split forces. I and you, Fili and Kili, with Gandalf and Bilbo, will chase into the mountain. Millicent, Balin, and Dwalin take the west side and pursue the warg rider. Thorin didn't hesitate. Split up. Be careful. I still want to see you alive to celebrate in the Lonely Mountain. They separated. Millicent leapt from Torredi and landed neatly on Balin's war goat to the old dwarf's amusement. Tarnas's group veered toward the mountain entrance, while Thorin's party cut around toward Ravenhill. Bilbo peered at the ruined mounds of Ravenhill and suddenly had a thought. Azog won't use a dwarven secret passage, he piped up. He wouldn't risk passing through somewhere we might have blocked. He'll go through the tunnels made by the earthworms, the worms that burrow beneath the mountain. Excellent, my master burglar, Thorin laughed. You are a hobbit who knows his holes. Below the great hall, Azog slipped into the old earthworm tunnels. He pushed open the door where the worms rested, and after eyeing a few orc corpses and making certain no human wizard guarded the entrance, chose a tunnel and went in. But as he moved, screams rose from the direction he had come, and hoofbeats thundered closer. Azog! Thorin's roar reached him before Thorin did. A war goat leaped down the stairs, and Thorin's eyes met Azog's, burning with rage. Kili loosed an arrow that found Azog's right shoulder with a cry. Gandalf and I will hold the orcs. Deal with him, Thorin. Tarnas called from above. Azog sneered when he heard the wizard would not descend. He shrugged off 3 throwing knives from Fili, tore one free from his shoulder, and taunted, Without your wizard friends, you are nothing, Thorin. You can't take revenge on me alone. Thorin stood, panting but steady. Fili and Kili flanked him, hatred plain on their faces. Azog, thinking to provoke him into a foolish charge, stepped closer and continued to taunt. Do you wonder why I gave up the mountain so easily? Why my legion looked small? Because they went to finish off your father, Thorin Oakenshield. Your father should be dying in Dol Guldur now. The prey my master decides to take never escapes. Right now, he should be crushed beneath rock, calling your name. Thorin's face trembled, but he did not rush. Azog took that as victory and lunged, drawing his blade. Suddenly a stone flew and struck Azog across the head. He staggered, thrown off balance, and looked up to find Thorin's cold sneer leaning over him. At that moment, a terrible cold spread along Azog's legs. The ground beneath him iced over and his limbs froze into place. He found himself forced to his knees. Thorin had raised his frozen shell axe, its frost crawling along the broken seams of bone and warming, no, chilling, everything it touched. Thorin placed the axe upon Azog's neck and gave a brief nod toward a small, cowering figure who had flung the stone from behind an orc corpse. "Thank you, Baggins," Thorin said softly. "Wait, Thorin Oakenshield. I did not lie. I ordered an ambush against your father. If you spare me, I will call it off." Azog pleaded, hoarse. Thorin's axe glinted. "Guess where the soldiers who attacked the Lonely Mountain went," he said. Before Azog could make sense of the words, Thorin brought the frozen shell axe down. A searing, icy pain shot through Azog's chest. Black blood spurted and then froze into crystalline shards where it had sprayed. Azog's scream choked off as the axe severed bone and flesh. The dull thud of the axe, the crack of ice, and the splintering sound of the neck were one. Azog's head rolled across the frosted ground. His frozen, contorted eyes seemed to stare southward, as if watching some distant end. Thorin planted a boot on the Defiler's head and crushed it into shimmering shards. In the year 2940 of the Third Age, Azog the Defiler died at the hands of Thorin Oakenshield, Lord of the Lonely Mountain. After 171 years, the Durin dwarves had come home. Chapter 148, The Feast. Bilbo watched Azog's head fall, and Thorin stamped on it before rising from behind the orc's corpse with a look of disgust. For a moment he seemed unreal to Bilbo. In the heroic biographies he'd read, Thorin was supposed to have fought a titanic duel with Azog, with Fili and Kili at his side, and only after terrible struggle would Azog be finally bested. Instead, Azog had died as simply as the other orcs Bilbo had seen on the journey, stiffened by Thorin's axe and then beheaded. After removing the head, Thorin drew a deep, shuddering breath as if a great weight had been lifted. The mental release let the exhaustion that had built up over days of strain crash down on him. He forced a tired smile at Bilbo. "That was thanks to the stone you threw. Very true aim." Bilbo was embarrassed. "But even if I hadn't thrown that, Fili and Kili would have helped you stop him." Kili laughed loud and bright. "At times like this, it's best to take the credit graciously." Fili slapped his brother on the shoulder. "Azog's dead, but the orcs in the mountain are still a problem. Tarns and Gandalf are keeping them at bay up above. Help me. Let's drag Azog's body out where the rest can see, and they'll scatter." If Thorin hadn't already crushed Azog's frozen head, his shell axe rhymed with frost, the simplest thing would have been for Fili to toss the head down the steps. Thorin watched Fili and Kili haul the body away and then sank to the floor. Bilbo saw how tired he was and asked, "Are you hurt anywhere?" "No. Only sleep has been scarce these past days. I'm tired." Suddenly, hurried footsteps and the clang of armor echoed down a tunnel. The sound of many feet put both of them on alert. Bilbo motioned for Thorin to take cover behind an overturned table. They peered over the wood just as a chorus of panicked orc voices reached them. "Report to Lord Azog. Humans, powerful soldiers with 3 great beasts, are coming through the tunnels the earthworm dug. The earthworm was cut down by their archers, and all the dwarves have come after us." Bilbo glanced at the fleeing orcs who were shoving one another to get away and murmured, "They must be the force that attacked your father." Thorin nodded. "The Red Lion Legion's captain told me. After Smaug struck, a human knight named Oga led his men and 3 huge lions stationed outside Ravenhill to support my father. Redon had not only predicted that Azog would use the earthworm to ruin Ravenhill, he had expected Azog to throw other earthworms and a big orc host at Thrain again. He had also feared the Lion Guard might be mauled by Smaug, so he kept them back where they could still aid Thrain. The orc host that had moved against Thrain, though composed of armored veterans, was not enormous. With Oga's timely interference and Thrain's readiness for an earthworm attack, they had trapped the orcs. What Thorin now faced were them, broken deserters. He called loudly for Fili and Kili, leapt from behind the table, seized his frost-rhymed axe, and charged. The orcs were routed with the help of Oga and Thrain. Thorin! The voice that tore through the hall was at once unfamiliar and the most familiar thing in the world. Thorin's grip on his axe loosened, the haft thudded on the frozen floor, and the sound lingered in the mountain's hollow. He turned slowly, frost cracking under his war boots, and the voice that had traveled 100 years rang clear. Thrain stepped from among the dwarf soldiers. Torchlight haloed him, rhyming the dark blood spatters on his armor where his warhammer had taken a life. His beard swung with the movement. His eyes looked at Thorin like a furnace. "Let me see," Thrain said, smiling despite the grime and battle. "Which little mole is causing such a stir in the lonely mountain?" Thorin staggered forward 2 steps and reached for his father's familiar breastplate, his fingers smoothing the blood-spattered metal, as if to prove he was awake. He steadied himself and managed at last, "Your beard needs trimming." Thrain threw himself on Thorin and hugged him so fiercely the younger dwarf's hands found nothing to hold. When he let go, he gazed at Thorin and laughed, tears carving bright rivulets in the lines of his face. He struck the stones with his warhammer and then gently ran a hand over the wrinkles on his son's brow. "The lad I knew has become a man." "Father." Thrain gripped Thorin's hand before he could speak further. "Gandalf told me how you proposed reclaiming the mountain and how the lords opposed you. Come, let those old stubborn fools see whether my son triumphed." Thorin did not refuse. He let his father take his hand. Seeing Thrain's back, still broad, still strong, Thorin felt a heat in his throat, as if he'd swallowed a draught of strong spirit. The pressure that had lain on his shoulders all these months melted away. News of Azog's death spread quickly through the mountain. Without their leader, the orcs collapsed like dry sand, and within 2 days the dwarves had cleared the tunnels. The lonely mountain was cleaned and made ready for homecoming. Then the feast began. Thorin first sent invitations to Tarns and the folk of the Golden Tree region, then to Gandalf and Bilbo, and finally to Bard and the people of Lake Town. He had not meant to invite King Thranduil and the Woodland Realm, yet, out of courtesy to Tarns, he swallowed his pride and extended the invitation. Bernal had already told Tarns and others of what happened at Lake Town. The Ringwraith's attack had tightened Gandalf's concern, which had barely eased after the mountain's reclaiming. Thranduil refused Thorin's invitation with a snort. "I'd rather fight the orcs than sit at a dwarf's brass-scented table," and marched his elves home. Only Legolas and Tauriel remained. Both had helped Bernal in containing the Ringwraiths. Legolas, unsure of his father's temper, did not return at once and accepted Bernal's hospitality. Tauriel, ashamed she had not contributed more, planned to leave quietly, but stayed for fear Legolas might be drawn into an argument with the dwarves. Inside the mountain, the banquet hall blazed. Torches turned the vault to molten gold. For the first time in 171 years, the black iron chandeliers hung glittering with flame and coin. Long tables hung on chains of silver seemed to float. Real streams ran along channels cut into the wood by dwarf craftsmen. Underground springs, guided through the stone, fed the waterways, and golden goblets bobbed on the flow, full of mead. Amber droplets that splashed out were deftly caught by merry dwarves with their hammer handles and gulped back down. Dane clambered onto the dais, grease from roasted mountain goat fat dropping from his orange beard, and bellowed, "Another barrel of ale for me!" Attendants rolled in barrel after barrel. When the lids came off, the scent of malt and yeast burst free, and Dane laughed aloud. At the center of the table, a whole beef lay on a rotating silver spit, its skin turned a glossy caramel. Bomber, armed with a jeweled carving knife, dove in. Sparks from dripping fat seared little holes in his tunic over his belly, but he tore off a haunch without hesitation and shoved it into his mouth. Mushroom dice and herbs peeked from the meat's seams. "Slow down, Bomber. You've eaten half a cow and drained a whole barrel of ale. How do you hold so much?" his brother shouted, flabbergasted. At the other end, Feely watched Keely with a conflicted look. Keely, clutching a wine pot, vaulted onto a chandelier by standing on a wine barrel and hooked his boot over the lamp frame. Leaning out, he called to Legolas, who sat uncomfortably beside Tarns. "Hey, elf, a drink for you." He poured the wine from a distance into Legolas's silver cup without spilling. "Elves don't drink dwarf wine? They can't leave the Lonely Mountains gate," he jeered, and the hall erupted in a barrage of slaps and shouts. Bernal frowned at Keely's rowdy antics. He didn't mind the dwarves joking with him, but the old animosity between elves and dwarves made such jests risky. Legolas was his guest. He rose to speak when Legolas, with a faint lift of an eyebrow, reached for the cup. When, quicker than expectation, Toriel snatched it from his hand, drained it in one, and inverted the empty cup on the table. The foam caught the light and threw a small rainbow in the chandelier's glow. "Good!" roared the dwarves, and the hall burst into cheers. Killy blinked, astonished, while Feely seized his drunken brother and pulled him down from the chandelier to a proper seat. Legolas leaned toward Toriel. "You didn't have to drink that for me," she replied in a low voice. "I couldn't stand their pressuring." At the end of the table, Thryne raised a mead pot, slung his arm around Thorin's shoulders, and poured him a drink. Thorin wiped a drop of mead from his eye, filled a pot, and returned the favor. Tarns, Gandalf, and Bilbo sat nearby. Gandalf, reaching across for a sauced morsel, slid a piece to Bilbo, who thanked him over and over. Gandalf chuckled. "You looked very far away just now. Thinking of something?" Bilbo chewed and swallowed before answering. "Yes, I was wondering how to write about this feast. Perhaps I'll put, 'This is the dwarves' night, so bright the very stones seem to sing.' What do you think, Gandalf?" "A perfect line, Bilbo," the wizard said. Tarns leaned in. "Gandalf, there are 2 things I want to show you." Gandalf, sensing his seriousness, asked, "What have you found?" Tarns cleared his throat and laid 2 rings on his palm, rings Bernal and Egon had taken from the ringwraiths they slew. "I don't know what they are," he said. "I felt a curse on them and didn't dare keep them without asking you. Do you know where these rings come from?" Gandalf's face went very still when he saw them. "Rings of power, the 9 given to men." Shock rippled across him. He glanced quickly left and right. None of the dwarves had noticed. He gripped Tarns's wrist and made him slip the rings away. "Never let any man know you have these," he whispered, urgent and low. Chapter 149, Remuneration. The banquet had ended with the dwarves' snores echoing through the hall. Thryne and Dine lay sprawled on the floor, utterly drunk. Though, thanks to the forges newly stoked inside the Lonely Mountain, the stone beneath them was warm. Radon and the Red Lion Legion, who had been invited to the feast, watched the sleeping dwarves in astonishment until Tarns explained that this was a dwarven custom. Only then did they stop arguing about whether to herd so many slumbering dwarves off to beds. In any case, with the dwarves in no condition to entertain guests, the attendants kept bringing food and drink to the Legion out of courtesy, but Radon and his men felt it would be improper to linger in the palace. They took their leave of Tarns and returned to River Valley Town. Radon with matters to discuss with Bard about the town and Lake Town. Millicent, who disliked crowds, had excused herself early and gone back to River Valley Town even before Radon. Thorin was not quite out cold. He waddled over to Tarns and his companions, belched and slurred. "Come, follow me. Time to settle the contract. I will. Give you your due, your reward." He grabbed Tarns's wrist with one hand and slung an arm around Bilbo, guiding them deeper into the palace. Bilbo glanced at Gandalf, bewildered, and Gandalf merely smiled and followed. Although drunk, Thorin's sense of direction was unimpaired. He led them to a recently cleared chamber piled with gems of every size and color, superbly forged weapons, and heavy armor. Gold coins seemed almost the least valuable things there. Thorin released them, slapped his own cheeks to clear the fog of drink, then promptly toppled into a mound of glittering jewels. Tarns helped him up. "Careful," he said. Thorin waved him off, then pulled from the heap a shirt woven of silvery mesh that gleamed like chainmail. Tarns recognized its extraordinary quality at once and asked, "What is this?" A proud smile split Thorin's face. "The dwarves' finest craft. Bilbo, this is yours." Bilbo blinked and shuffled forward. "To be honest, Thorin, I don't feel I deserve a reward. The agreement said I was to help you get the Arkenstone, and I didn't finish that task. Thorin shook his head. You helped me throw a stone at Azog's head. Take it. This is made of mithril, light as a feather, hard as dragon scale, forever bright. Didn't you say tonight you wanted something to prove to your descendants that you fought at the Battle of the Lonely Mountain? This mithril shirt is proof enough. He gestured around the room. Besides this, you may choose one more thing, weapon or jewel, whatever you like. Bilbo hesitated, then shook his head with decision. What you've given me is enough. I don't need anything else. Gandalf chuckled. One shirt of mithril could buy the whole Shire, he added. Bilbo's hand trembled as he held the shirt. He nearly dropped it. Thorin took the nod and did not press further. Then he turned to Tarnas. As for you, Tarnas, I don't know how to repay you. What you've done goes far beyond what the contract required, or even what a friend should do. He made a dry joke. Not every friend can turn the tide against a dragon, and your wealth. Why, you give away enchanted weapons like the frozen shell axe as if they were trinkets. I don't know what treasure could match your help. Tarns, uncharacteristically shy, scratched his head. I didn't expect to gain anything. You needn't worry about repayment, Thorin. Before Thorin could reply, Gandalf intervened. Do accept something. Everyone here knows of your friendship, but not everyone will. If you walk away with nothing and the tale spreads, it could harm Thorin's reputation. The Lonely Mountain lies in ruins and needs rebuilding. Reputation matters. Thorin belched, pointed at Gandalf, and admitted, Aye, this old wizard can be stubborn, but he sometimes gives good counsel. Gandalf bristled inwardly, but Tarns only nodded. All right, let me see what else is here. Bilbo, watching Gandalf stand back, asked, Doesn't Gandalf get anything? Thorin waved. Of course, the wizard gets a share. Gandalf was about to refuse when the glitter of jewels caught his eye. To refuse would be disrespectful, he said, and selected a delicate necklace clearly fit for a lady, inspected it, and slid it into his pocket. Thorin teased, Are you giving that to some fair lady? Gandalf cleared his throat. Perhaps. Tarns chose a highly ornamented, jewel-encrusted decorative sword. This is my choice, he said, pleased. Thorin frowned slightly. That sword is for display, not for battle. Are you sure? Tarns smiled and spoke earnestly. Exactly because it's ornamental, I chose it. It will stand in the Golden Tree territory, so everyone who enters will know of the bond between you and me. Thorin's eyes softened. True, you have many magic weapons, but few such symbolic ornaments. He yawned. I suspect my father and I will join Dreamland shortly. Let's call the revels for tonight done. Tarns agreed. It's late. Radon will want to speak with Bard in the morning, and Bilbo plans to leave tomorrow, so tomorrow we part, for now. Hearing Bilbo would go, Thorin sobered a touch. Tomorrow morning, I'll bring Fili and Kili and the others to see you off. Find us in River Valley Town, Tarnas said. After they left, Bilbo turned to Gandalf. Gandalf, do you really have a lady? Will you give her that necklace? Gandalf looked around to be sure no one else was listening, then shot Bilbo an annoyed glance. Mind your tongue. That necklace is meant for an elf. Tarnas's face lit up. Is it the necklace that caused the quarrel between Thranduil and the Dwarves? Gandalf lowered his voice. Yes, I didn't expect to find it so casually laid out. While Thorin is drunk, I'll go after Thranduil tonight, if he hasn't gone far with his host. Tarnas shrugged. I think the Dwarves may have forgotten it, but if you're going, let me take Bilbo back to River Valley Town tonight. Gandalf agreed. Neither Tarns nor Gandalf mentioned letting Legolas carry the necklace to Thranduil. Father and son were still at odds, and bringing them together might only inflame matters. Gandalf hesitated as he prepared to leave, then leaned close to Tarns. One more thing. Those 2 rings you found. Never tell anyone they came from the Ringwraiths. I cannot imagine what some greedy men might do if they learned that, especially since you said you could purify the curse in them. Tarns grew serious. I've heard you. In the morning, after Bernal and Egon wake, I'll tell them to keep silent about the rings. Gandalf breathed easier and took his leave. Bilbo watched the 2 whispering with curiosity. Once Gandalf had gone, he asked Tarns, What were you 2 talking about? Tarns smiled. Some things are better kept to as few ears as possible. Then he remembered. Bilbo, didn't you say you'd found a magic ring? You wanted to show it to Gandalf, but the war delayed you. Why not show it now? Bilbo's face fell. I'd like to, but I don't know where it went. It may have slipped from my pocket when I hid from the orcs hunting for Azog in the mountain. Tarns patted his shoulder. It's all right. If you can't find it, my teacher Selin can make you a ring that hides you for a time. Bilbo brightened. Then I'll leave it to you. Tarns summoned Torete with a whistle. The spirit horse appeared in a puff of air, snorting affectionately, nudging Tarns, then whinnying softly at Bilbo, who liked to feed it fruit. Bilbo produced a banana he had secreted from the feast, peeled it, and fed Torete with a flourish. Tarns helped Bilbo up and joked, "If Torete were not a spirit, I suspect you'd fatten it with fruit." Bilbo stroked the mane. "Just a few treats. Won't make it fat." As he reached for a handkerchief, Bilbo's fingers brushed something cold. For a heartbeat, he worried about the missing ring. "By the way," he asked, trying to sound casual, "what does Torete normally eat?" Tarns blinked and answered awkwardly, "I haven't fed it anything special. There's a plant at home called loa fruit. Torete prefers that." Bilbo's eyes lit up. "Loa fruit? I've never heard of it. Do you have seeds? I could plant some near Bag End, so when you visit with Torete, it'll have a proper meal." Tarns produced several pale red hawthorn-like fruits, seeds inside, and handed them to Bilbo, who tucked them into his pocket. Early the next morning, Bernal and Egon returned to the Lonely Mountain, and with them came someone who surprised Tarns. He called out, "Legolas, why have you come? Where is Tauriel?" Legolas inclined his head politely. "Tauriel has gone back to the woodland realm. I, however, am very interested in the golden tree that Mr. Bernal spoke of. As Lord of the Golden Tree, would you permit me to visit your territory?" Tarnas laughed and shook his head. "You're always welcome. No need for formalities. My lands aren't some forbidden place." Chapter 150. Going Home. Only after Legolas had spent some time in the Golden Tree territory did he finally admit the true reason for his visit. It had been urged by his father, Thranduil. The two had a brief conversation back in River Valley Town. Though Legolas still carried some resentment toward Thranduil, his father's act of bringing the woodland realm to offer support made him realize that, at bottom, his father still cared. He simply needed time to adjust his feelings. Perceiving this, Thranduil nudged him toward a path to visit the Golden Tree territory where Tarns lived. Tarns, of course, had no idea Thranduil had steered Legolas for that reason. He assumed Legolas was genuinely curious about the territory. Tarns was, however, paying close attention to what Radon and Bard had to say. When Bard finished speaking, Tarns asked in surprise, "You're serious, Bard? You want me to station an army in Lake Town?" Bard nodded gravely. "I am. I consulted others. They agreed. I've been thinking this through. Once the dwarves retake the Lonely Mountain, River Valley Town will naturally begin to recover. But right now the town is weak. In the eyes of other human kingdoms, we, being nearest to the Lonely Mountain and unable to defend ourselves, look like fat sheep waiting to be slaughtered." He shrugged. "I don't mean to say other kingdoms will certainly move to seize River Valley Town, but as the mayor trusted by the townsfolk, I have to prepare for the worst. Better to ally now with someone I know than to rely on an unfamiliar kingdom. That someone is you and your Golden Tree territory." He glanced at Radon and added, "After what General Radon did, slaying a dragon single-handedly, his deeds will spread across Middle-earth. Anyone thinking of taking advantage of your lands will have to consider the cost." Tarns looked at Radon, his shoulders and waist bandaged, and told Bard, "I have no objections. Which legion to station, Radon and I will discuss with our commanders when we return." Bard's brow arched at mention of other legions besides the Storm and Red Lion legions. He kept that thought to himself and agreed readily. "Of course, once both sides are ready for a formal meeting, we'll finalize the details." He gave Tarns a conspiratorial wink. "After all, you're a wizard. You have ways of coming and going quickly, don't you?" Bard had guessed how the Storm and Red Lion legions had suddenly appeared in Lake Town. Tarns nodded, filing the matter away to hand over to Kenneth Haight when he returned. After Bard left, Tarns turned to Radon. "Is Bard's change of heart why you challenged Smaug?" Radon nodded calmly. "That was part of it." Tarns pressed, curious. "What else?" Radon answered plainly. "I wanted to face the dragons of this world. Smaug was a foe worth remembering." Tarns, unable to hide his excitement, complained with a touch of envy. Hearing you say that makes me want to fight Smaug even more. Radon shook his head. Even if you could defeat Smaug easily, I would still try to dissuade you. I believe King Regent Bernal and that female swordswoman connected to the Valkyrie would agree with me. Tarns looked taken aback. Why? Because, Radon said quietly, you are the one who can summon people and things from the lands between into this world. You are our only hope, a miracle that could right our regrets. Tarnas fell silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, he gestured at Radon's blood-stained bandages. Are your wounds serious enough to need dressings? If the blessed potion in the red dew grail isn't enough, I can use prayers to help heal you. Radon smiled faintly and peeled back a strip of bandage to show unmarked skin beneath. Tarn stared. You're fine? Then why keep the bandages on? Radon looked toward the direction Bard had left and explained, to prevent people from being afraid. The world will accept a tale in which a hero defeats a dragon but pays dearly for it. They will not accept someone who wins without cost. If people admire but also fear you, their fear can overshadow reason. That's not the effect I want. My victory over Smaug should tell the world the golden tree has a keen sword. My pretended injury tells people that the sword still dulls and needs sharpening. Too sharp a blade makes enemies everywhere. Tarns nodded thoughtfully, then sighed. I understand what you mean, but it's all so complicated. Radon's voice was soft. I wish everyone could be as straightforward as you, but reality is not. If you want to be a worthy Elden Lord, besides strength, you should learn from my brother, Judicator Rykard. Tarns frowned. Rykard? The Rykard I know is the demigod called the Blasphemous King, not some Judicator. Radon bowed his head. I know his crimes. I fell into madness under the influence of the Scarlet Rot. Perhaps Rykard was seduced by the Great Serpent. I don't excuse his deeds. He should be punished. But maybe, like me, he can be freed from the corruption if you choose to summon him. Tarnas understood the implication. Radon was suggesting Rykard be the next demigod Tarn summoned. He said carefully, I will consider it. Radon fell silent. He knew pushing would only harden Tarns's displeasure. After a preliminary assessment of River Valley Town, Radon was permitted to stay there temporarily with Freya, Oga, and Jerian. In the eyes of Thorin and Bard, Radon still counted as severely injured, and River Valley Town provided a convenient place to play the part of recuperation. Lake Town, by contrast, had suffered heavy damage from the ringwraiths. Many wooden houses were ruined, and fewer intact homes remained than in River Valley Town. Bernal, Egon, Millicent, and the Storm Legion prepared to return to the Golden Tree territory with Tarns. Bilbo and Legolas would travel with them through the portal. Gandalf, having delivered the necklace to Thranduil, embraced Tarns and Bilbo, bade them farewell, and hurried on toward Gondor. Thorin arrived as promised, bringing members of the Lonely Mountain expedition to say their goodbyes. Bilbo looked at the dwarves, 13 months together that had felt longer than a lifetime, and felt the sting of parting. He managed a smile. If any of you pass by Hobbiton, afternoon tea's at 4. There'll be plenty of tea and snacks. You're always welcome. He blinked and added, do send a letter first so I can restock the cellar with what you like. Thorin inclined his head. You will always be welcome in the Lonely Mountain, Bilbo Baggins. It will be your second home. Tarns teased them lightly. It's not as if we're parting forever. No need for all this sentimentality. I'll handle visits. I'm a wizard after all. He planned to set up a Stella portal between the Golden Tree territory and the Lonely Mountain to ease communication. Its placement, however, would have to account for dwarven defenses, so he would discuss details with Thorin. Bilbo's first portal experience had him blinking and finding himself beneath a glowing tree that seemed to reach the sky. He could not contain his curiosity, peppering Tarns with questions as they toured Stormvale Castle. Nefeli Luke arrived when she sensed the commotion. Once the immediate business with the returning Storm Legion was settled, Tarns took Bilbo and the otherwise reserved Legolas on a proper tour. Bilbo gradually quieted, taking in every detail of the castle. Legolas, who had spoken little on the journey, watched the Rivendell elves who had settled here with visible surprise. You have elves living in your territory? He asked Tarnas. Tarns smiled at the greeting elves and replied, not exactly living permanently. Elrond sent them to help rebuild. They liked the golden tree and weren't pressured to return, and there's plenty of room here, so they stayed. How long they remain depends on their mood. Bilbo asked about Rogier and Mr. D, Rogier being the storyteller Bilbo missed. Tarn said Rogier often traveled and his whereabouts were hard to pin down, but offered to take Bilbo to his usual resting place. Legolas excused himself to visit the Rivendell elves on his own. They agreed to meet for dinner at the City Lord Hall. Tarns led Bilbo to Rogier's residence. He knocked several times and received no answer. A neighbor poked his head out, recognized Tarns, and greeted him respectfully. "Tarnies? Are you looking for Rogier?" Tarns asked where Rogier had gone. "Mr. Rogier left with Mr. Darien about a week ago," the neighbor said apologetically. "I don't know where they went. I'm very sorry, Lord Tarns." Chapter 151, King City. Rodel, Chapter 146, Royal Capital. On one side, Tarns and Bilbo discovered Rogier was not home. On the other, Legolas ran into an unexpected reunion. "Elrond Elrohir, you're here too?" he said, surprised to see the two elves from Rivendell. Elrond and Elrohir, sons of Lord Elrond, looked very much alike. Dark hair, gray eyes, fair, handsome faces, gleaming armor, and silver-gray cloaks. Legolas had met them before, and was all the more surprised to find such high-born Rivendell elves in the Golden Tree territory. Elrond the Elder paused at Legolas's voice, then smiled. "Well then, Elrohir, our Prince Legolas of the Woodland Realm has come to visit this enchanted place." Elrohir returned the elf handshake and asked, "Will you dine with us tonight, Legolas?" "The last time I saw you was centuries ago, wasn't it?" Legolas matched the gesture. "To be precise, 415 years, he said. "Are you settled here because of the Golden Tree?" Elrond shook his head. "Settled? No. We are curious about the Golden Tree, and life here is comfortable, but Elrohir and I have no intention of living away from Rivendell. We would rather accompany our father in hunting the orcs that plague Middle-earth." Elrohir nodded. "We only came to await the return of Lord Tarns." His eyes brightened. "I heard Tarns has been occupied with the Lonely Mountain. Your woodland realm is close. Legolas, you must know where Tarns is. How long before his return? What happened with the dwarves and Smaug?" "Father said Mithrandir did much to help the dwarves reclaim the mountain." Legolas hesitated, then replied, "Tarns has already returned. I arrived in the Golden Tree territory with him. He used one of his teleportation spells." Elrond and Elrohir exchanged surprised glances. The elder's expression tightened. Clearly, much had happened. "This isn't the place to speak of it," he said. "Come inside and tell us everything about the Lonely Mountain." Elrohir smiled. "I'll have attendants bring fresh Golden Tree fruit. There should be a good meat feast tonight." Elrond added, "Then again, Lord Tarns will likely prepare a welcoming banquet for Legolas, so we might simply bring gifts and visit the City Lord Hall." Elrohir agreed. Under their warm invitation, and since he'd planned to visit the elves' dwelling, Legolas accepted. Outside the timber house festooned with flowers and greenery, Elrond turned to the locked door, called pleasantly, "Estelle, are you awake? Open up, friend in tow." Legolas blinked. "Estelle? I thought your sister was Arwen. Has Lord Elrond another child?" Elrohir laughed. "No, Estelle is a human child my father adopted. His father died fighting orcs, and my father raised him." "I've been awake," a young tender voice answered from inside. "I've already finished sword training for the afternoon." The door swung inward. Estelle stepped out, still in practice clothes, hair tousled, calluses on his hands. He gave Elrond and Elrohir a quick look, then fixed on the stranger, Legolas, and the two silver blades at his waist. "Are you a swordsman?" he asked, eager. Legolas smiled. "I'm more an archer than a swordsman. If you want to learn archery, come to me, but for swordsmanship, those two at my hips should do." Estelle pouted. "I don't want to practice archery. Elrond told me not to bite off more than I can chew, so I'm focusing on swordsmanship." Elrond ruffled his hair affectionately. "Good. Any fruit left inside? If not, fetch some from the dwarves' farm." Estelle dodged the hand. "You and second brother ate all the fruit yesterday. Why always me?" Elrond coughed. "They favor you, the human child. Hurry, there's good news. Tarns has returned. When you bring back fruit, Elrohir and I will take you to see him tonight." Estelle's eyes lit. "Teacher has returned?" Legolas looked surprised. "He's your teacher too?" Estelle puffed out his chest. "Yes, I'm Teacher Tarnas's first student. He said I have exceptional talent," Legolas murmured, amused. First, Fili and Kili, the two dwarf brothers, also called Tarn's teacher. Elrohir, who had been following behind, explained with a smile, "The first student claim is Estelle's." In truth, Tarnes first took two dwarves of Durin's line as disciples. Estelle is the third, but he won't let anyone forget he's his first human. Estelle bolted off for the dwarves' farm, returning soon with a basket of fruit. By then, Legolas had recounted his adventures in Lake Town, finished just as the sun sank and the golden tree's glow spread across the land. The last rays slipped through the fruit basket as night rose. Elrodin clapped. "It's late. We should go to the City Lord Hall in Stormvale Castle to greet Tarns." Legolas, as a guest, agreed. "I should find him before he sends guards looking." Estelle hurried to change. "I must look proper for Teacher Tarns." Elrohir rose to help him choose an outfit. In the City Lord Hall, Tarns wondered whether guards should go look for Legolas. Bilbo sat contentedly by the dining table, satisfied and hungry. Then Estelle's excited voice rang from the entrance. "Teacher Tarnis, Uncle Bilbo!" The Storm Knights at the door opened the hall after verifying the visitors. "Uncle?" Bilbo was startled, then smiled as Estelle, only half a head shorter than the hobbit, leapt forward to hug him. Estelle then stood before Tarns, bowed, and declared, "Congratulations on defeating the great foe, Teacher Tarns." Tarns glanced at Legolas, who entered with Elrodon and Elrohir, and understood why Estelle spoke so. He scooped the boy up lightly, seated him on a wooden chair beside Bilbo, and asked kindly, "I've received your congratulations. How have you been these days?" "Very well," Estelle said. "The armored uncles and aunts were kind and helped with my swordsmanship, though some are missing. I don't know where they went." Tarns knew what Estelle meant. The Storm Knights had been temporarily dispatched to Lake Town. He chatted with Estelle a while longer, then turned to Legolas. "Where have you been? What do you think of the place?" Legolas's handsome face softened. "It's peaceful. The difference from other human realms is that smiles are common here, no constant sorrow." Tarns smiled. "I'm glad you said that. Stay as long as you like. You may meet unexpected people." Legolas nodded. After brief courtesies with Elrodon and Elrohir, Tarnes hosted a welcome banquet for Bilbo and Legolas. When it ended, he arranged lodgings for Bilbo. Legolas went back with the elves. Having settled affairs, Tarnes finally went to the courtyard where the golden tree stood. He had been accumulating souls with his soul collector in Lake Town, River Valley, and the Lonely Mountain, never neglecting to gather what he could. The collector, however, had reached its limit. He would need to consult Teacher Selen about that. Raising the faintly glowing device in one hand, Tarns laid his other on the majestic trunk of the golden tree and eased his mind into the Elden Ring. His purpose was clear: royal capital Leyndell. The courtyard around Stormvale Castle was becoming cramped for the tree's growth. Leyndell could accommodate it, and crucially, it was the right place to summon a certain young woman who lived in Tarns's memory. He did not know how he would speak to Melina, or how she would receive him, but avoidance would not resolve anything. It was time to face her. Tarns found the word for Leyndell in the Elden Ring and confirmed the summoning. As he had done before with Stormvale and Redmane castles, golden light burst from the golden tree and washed over the entire estate, houses and farmlands of elves, humans, and dwarves alike. Stormvale Castle shimmered in the distance, and in its place, an immense royal capital rose. The ancient city, once ruined in the lands between by the shattered Elden Ring, stood resplendent beneath the twin golden trees' radiance. Dark gold dominated the city's palette, towering walls, winding roads woven into a maze, broken spires and domes draped in vines, dragon wing remnants serving as natural stairways, shattered statues and rusted weapons scattered through the streets like mute witnesses to past glory and war. At the city's heart loomed the Golden Tree Cathedral, built atop enormous roots, the branches and stone steps fused into one. The twin golden trees had not yet reached the colossal scale of Leyndell's originals, so Tarns knew they would need to build a proper approach to the cathedral. For now, though, his attention was fixed on one figure materializing before him. He forced himself to meet her gaze and quietly called her name. Melina. Chapter 147. Melina, Melina. Tarns's trembling voice flowed through the courtyard like a small stream. The young woman, a short distance away, looked at him with an unreadable expression. Tarnis suspected, as others who had just been summoned had experienced, that she might be sifting through the memories of 8 cycles of reincarnation. He was right. Melina was piecing together memories that had suddenly returned to her. Among them were flashes of hunting, a tarnished consumed by the mad flame. But more often, she saw the tarnished on the snowy mountain, him, whom she had put to sleep with magic, while he still refused to let go of her hand. She breathed out slowly, raised a hand to inspect the body the golden tree had given her, and for a moment Tarns braced himself in nervousness. Then a small, familiar smile curved her lips, and with that voice he knew, she said, I imagine you have a great deal to tell me, and even more to explain. But that's all right. We have time. I'll listen. Tell me the parts I don't know. At that, Tarnis's eyes went wet. A weight he had carried shifted and eased. He had been terrified that, when her memories returned and she learned he had once surrendered himself to the mad flame, she would regard him with cold fury. The thought of her judging him like that had haunted him. He swallowed, forced his voice steady despite the tremor, and said, "Okay." The golden tree's light softened, running across the cathedral courtyard like melted honey. Melina's features were clearer than Tarns's fragmented memories had allowed. She stepped lightly over floating golden rune shards, each footfall scattering star-like ripples. She stopped before him and lifted his helmet with casual ease, revealing the still youthful, handsome face beneath. His eyes, though, were different, not as bright as before. They had been marked by great change. Melina let her warm hand skim his stubbled cheek and then lowered it. Tarnins met her gaze, his Adam's apple bobbing, and said, "I haven't gained or lost weight." She handed the helmet back and pinched her nose. "I wasn't going to comment on your weight. You still don't bathe enough, do you? I can smell the sweat as soon as you take off your helmet. Did you go to a banquet last night? Your clothes reek of wine and food. No mouse would want to come near." Her sharp tongue hit a chord of familiarity in him. Tarns laughed despite himself. "There was a banquet tonight," he admitted, "and last night I celebrated with some new friends after defeating a powerful enemy." Melina's expression softened. "Are you hurt anywhere?" He shook his head, grumbling like a contrite child. "No. You know I've fought many flying dragons and ancient worms in the lands between, yet General Radon refused to let me fight one just now. He had his fun while I watched. He explained afterwards, but I'm still annoyed." "Radon?" Melina echoed, puzzled. Tarns held his helmet at his waist with one hand and reached toward her with the other. "Yes, General Radon. You know him, but there's too much to tell here. Come with me to a quiet place in the royal capital, Leyndell, suitable for talking. I'll tell you everything I've been through." Without hesitation, Melina placed her hand in his. "Okay," she said softly. Tarns gripped her hand as if afraid she might disappear, then blew the spirit steed whistle. Torette answered. "Ah, Torette, long time no see. Thank you for keeping watch over me." He helped Melina sit sideways on the horse's back. She stroked the animal gently. Torette paused a moment at sight of her, then wagged and snorted happily, carrying them slowly through a royal capital Leyndell that was, for now, quiet and nearly empty. They rode through the dim morning, as Tarns began to tell her, in measured pieces, all he had seen since arriving in Middle-earth. As the morning star slid below the horizon and Torette's mane brushed away the last fog, Melina sat close behind him, absent-mindedly fingering the cape on the back of his armor. His voice rose and fell with the evening wind. Her timely questions filled gaps he had left. Smaug's breath nearly melted River Valley town, but Radon used gravity magic to deflect the dragon's flames elsewhere, he said. "When we broke into the Lonely Mountain, it was Bilbo who pointed us to the enemy's leader. We found him at the bottom of the mountain, like when you and I went through the Rodel sewers, and there we met Azog." Melina listened as he described battles and companions. Sometimes she clutched the corner of her cloak when a story thrilled her. Torette stopped occasionally to nibble dew-damp grass. The saddlebags chimed softly, as if holding Gandalf's pipe, Bard's harpoon, or Thorin's axe. At first light, Tarns watched Dane's hammer shatter the skull of the last troll. Unnoticed, Torette had carried them to the top of the royal capital's main gate. The city's towering walls fell away in a colossal curtain, and the buildings inside were waking under the golden light. "Look, Nefeli Lux and the others will have come at night to check on things," Tarne said, pointing to a faint group approaching at the city's edge. Only then did Melina realize he had been speaking all night. In the span of a single ride, Tarnes had compressed nearly 2 years of his life in that world into a stream of words. She turned to him and asked quietly, "Have you ever hated me?" He stopped walking for a moment. Silence stretched between them before he said hoarsely, "Of course, I resented you once. In those nights when madness crept in, I screamed at the grace, asked why I should burn myself for one person." Melina pursed her lips. Tarnis cleared his throat and continued in a steadier voice. "But maybe because of you, I learned to love the flora and fauna of the lands between. Even if the world is tattered, there are people willing to mend it. People like you. And I've done foolish things too, followed your counsel, then ignored it on another cycle. So, are we even now?" He turned to her with that same goofy grin he'd worn when they first met. Melina laughed, then pinched his earlobe until he grimaced. "Do you think jumping into lava and pilfering mushrooms from Scarlet Rotkin makes us even? If one day the mad flame roasts your brain into a honey muffin, I might have to mold you a new one out of rune fragments, if you still understand the word danger by then." Tarns fumbled a reply. "Let's get down to the city wall. Nephili's almost at the gate." They let go of each other's barbs and descended. The main gate, hundreds of meters tall, shuddered and swung open on both sides, causing the ground itself to tremble. Even Tarns, who had seen many wonders, felt his heart stir at the sight. "Tarnas!" Nephili Lu called from where the narrow band of morning light revealed figures arriving below the gate. She had brought only her right-hand men, Storm Knight Oleg and Ingwell. Bilbo and Legolas had been curious about the golden light that seemed to cover whoever lay down in it. They had followed along. The elves, humans, and dwarves who had long lived under the golden tree were used to such phenomena. If buildings could move and new lights be summoned, they always adjusted. Stormvale Castle's patrols would have to be reworked, and the Stormhawks would help in the sky, but things would settle. Tarns led Melina to the wall just in time to catch Legolas's wide-eyed stare at the royal capital. The magnificent and crumbling city was reflected in his emerald eyes. The golden tree's glow warmed his cheeks. "By the great Iluvatar," he breathed, "such a miraculous thing exists." Bilbo, who had noticed the woman behind Tarnes since they arrived, stepped up and asked directly, "Tarnes, is that?" He did not utter the name he suspected. Tarnes had told him many women's names, and the Hobbit had learned, via Rogier's additions, that Tarnes's relationships were complicated. Bilbo decided not to blurt out a name that might embarrass his friend. He smiled, stood on tiptoe, and extended his hand. "Hello, I am Bilbo Baggins, the first friend Tarns made here." Melina hesitated, dismounted Torit, shook the Hobbit's hand briefly, and lowered her hood. "Hello, Mr. Baggins," she said softly. "Tarns spoke of you last night. I am grateful you gave him a warm home and food when he needed it most." Bilbo began to protest modestly, but Melina continued, eyes gentle. "Also, if Tarns ever does things you cannot understand, like suddenly swinging his sword at a wall because he says there's a hidden door, or trashing every table and chair in the house, I apologize on his behalf." Bilbo blinked, stunned. "You mean he actually—" Tarnes hurried in to defend himself. "That's not true. I'm not insane. I know what's sensible and what's not." Nephili stepped forward, smiling faintly. "Congratulations on summoning Rodel as well," she said. "You really pulled off something great overnight." Tarns raised an eyebrow. "You didn't come just to praise me, did you?" "Of course not," Nephili replied. "This isn't the first time you've summoned a building, but while you were off in the Lonely Mountain, 2 rangers claiming to be from Black Gate turned up. They came because of the Golden Tree and left a letter inviting people from the Golden Tree territory to Black Gate. If you have time, come back to Stormvale Castle with me, and I'll show you the letter. You can decide what to do." Chapter 153, Herba Rhizophory. Black Gate? Where is that? Tarns asked, confused. Nephili Lu glanced at Bilbo, then answered, "According to the map your hobbit friend gave us, the Black Gate, also called Morannon, the Gate of Mordor, lies northwest of the Ash Mountains. The Ash Mountains are in the southeast of Middle-earth. In theory, that place should be crawling with orcs and other dark things now." Legolas, who had been listening, added, "The Black Gate, I know of it. For years, a band of Dunedain rangers have been posted there to keep orcs from Mordor from pouring out. If I recall correctly, Gondor also supports those rangers. He paused, worried Tarns might not yet grasp the danger, and continued. Do you remember the ring wraiths I fought with Bernal and Egon at Lake Town? Their masters are likely within Mordor, behind the Black Gate. Now Tarns understood. He nodded vigorously. I see, but I have no time to go to such a distant place at the moment. He gestured back toward the sprawling but sparsely populated royal capital Leyndell. First, I must solve the manpower shortage on our own lands. Nephili Lu sighed. Good that you understand. Bernal returned the Storm Legion to me and passed on a message. The human lord of River Valley Town hopes you can station a legion there. Please see to it as soon as you can. Then she remembered something. Oh, about the Storm Legion, Oleg has something to report. Speak, Tarns said. Oleg stepped forward, bowed slightly, and said respectfully, Lord Tarns, in the battle at Lake Town, the Storm Legion suffered 75 deaths and 1 severe injury. I need to report on the injured Storm Knight. Tarns frowned. What's wrong with him? Oleg hesitated, then explained. His wound is strange. Ordinary treatments won't heal it. Lord Bernal used Golden Tree prayers to mend him, and the blessing worked while it lasted. But once the prayers faded, the wound returned. I must ask if you could look at him. Yesterday we thought it a simple curse. Last night's treatment suggests a more complicated cause. Tarns was surprised. Even if he drank a potion made from golden grace, it didn't hold? When he drank it, the wound closed instantly, Oleg said. But as with Bernal's prayers, once the potion was absorbed, the wound reopened. At present, the knight can only survive in a place suffused with golden grace. Otherwise, the injury recurs as soon as he leaves. Legolas had been listening and now frowned deeply. He hurried to catch up as Tarns and the others mounted their horses. I may know what kind of wound this is, he said as he fell in with them. Was this wound sustained in a fight with a ringwraith? Oleg looked at him in surprise and nodded. Yes. When our physician asked how it happened, the knight said he'd deliberately taken a thrust in order to restrain a ringwraith's movement. He exchanged his body for the blow. Legolas's expression grew grave. Among the ringwraiths is an entity called the Angmar Witch King, and his weapon is the Morgul blade. A person stabbed with one can have part of the blade left inside the wound. The shard works its way inward and can pierce the heart. That would explain why the wound won't heal. Tarnas frowned. If it were only a curse, Golden Grace should have healed it. Legolas looked at him with some admiration. There is one remedy I know for that kind of injury, a herb called aceras. In the common tongue, it's known as kingfoil. Some call it king's leaf. It grows commonly in Gondor, though many there use it merely as a tonic and do not recognize its true medicinal power. Because of that, Gondorian merchants sometimes trade it. I heard last night that your territory already has trade with a Gondor caravan that grows flowers and herbs. Nephili's eyes brightened. Ah, those very fragrant plants. I remember buying a few bunches out of curiosity and had the maids plant them in the ornamental gardens at Stormvale Castle, so it can be used medicinally. Tarns breathed a relieved sigh. Then perhaps the Storm Knight's wound isn't beyond hope. Legolas, without you we'd be at a loss. Thank you. Legolas smiled politely. It is my duty. I could not stand to see a warrior who faced the ringwraiths perish from a Morgul blade's wound. They returned to Stormvale Castle. In the gardens Nephili had mentioned, broad patches of kingfoil grew and filled the air with a light scent. Legolas instructed the attending physician on how to prepare and apply the herb. Tarns and the others followed to the infirmary and stayed until they could see that the Storm Knight, wounded by a Morgul blade, was indeed healed when kept in the presence of kingfoil. Tarns turned to Nephili. From Bernal's report, the ringwraiths are a grave threat. Our soldiers will likely encounter them again. We should set aside land within Stormvale for kingfoil cultivation, and our physicians should research medicinal preparations like pills, similar to the poison moss remedies, to issue to the army. That would greatly reduce post-battle casualties from ringwraith wounds. Nephili nodded. I'd intended the same. Oleg, you'll take responsibility for this. Hand patrol and defense duties for Stormvale over to Ingwell. Oleg and Ingwell, who stood like guardians behind her, agreed at once. Both then exchanged troubled looks and glanced at Nephili as if wanting to speak but hesitating. "What is it?" Nephili asked. Oleg and Ingwell shared a glance. Oleg spoke first. "Lady Nephili Lukes, whether it's planting kingfoil or managing patrols, it will require many hands, but we simply don't have enough soldiers. Even counting the Storm Legion that just returned from the Lonely Mountain, our numbers are barely sufficient." Ingwell added, "Most of the Storm Legion was deployed to the Lonely Mountain, so the few who remained have been doing the work of 3 men each. They've been working without rest." Nephili looked to Tarns. He seemed to feel the pressure and quickly said, "I know. I'll find a way." Melina, standing behind Tarns, let out a soft laugh and stepped forward. She lifted her skirt in a small bow to Nephili, Oleg, and Ingwell. "Give the Tarnished Lord some time. He'll gather personnel, and I'll help." Bilbo, who had been traveling with the party, smiled at Tarns. "Looks like you'll be busy, Tarnas." Tarnas gave an apologetic look. "I'm sorry, there's too much to do. I might not be able to accompany you on a tour of the Golden Tree territory." Bilbo waved a hand. "Don't worry, you are a king. You don't need to spend your time on a hobbit like me. Your company yesterday was more than enough." He added, "Estelle is in your territory, so let me stay with the elves a few days. I'll explore by day, and if you're free in the evenings, we can dine together." Legolas offered, "If Master Bilbo stays at the elven residence, I'll keep him company during the day." Tarns did not object. "Very well. When I'm less busy, I'll invite you all to visit my territory." Bilbo bid the others farewell, and talking with Legolas about where to visit next in the Golden Tree lands, left. Tarns, after a short discussion with Nephili about plans, quickly left the Storm Legion camp infirmary with Melina. He did not head directly for royal capital Leyndell, however. He went to find his teacher, Selin. Tarns needed to solve the Soul Collector's limited capacity. He had seen on the Lonely Mountain far too many souls that could not be gathered, and the sight had pained him. If he had had the means, he would have summoned the Rhodel royal army as well. But with the runes of the Soul Collector and the blessings stored in the Golden Tree nearly spent, and Melina having been summoned too, options were limited. He knocked politely at Selin's door. "Teacher Selin, are you in?" "Enter," came Selin's lazy voice. Tarns pushed the door open. Selin was as ever, curtains drawn against the light, candles burning with blue flames, and strange experiments cluttering the room. She blinked at Melina, who stood behind Tarns. "Oh, the soul that followed you has been summoned into a body? Like Oga?" Her tone held a spark of surprise, and then curiosity. An experimental idea seemed to cross her mind. Tarns waited. Selin's quick-fired thoughts slowed, and she abandoned the notion she'd briefly entertained, preserving a soul to graft it into a shadow golden tree form. "Is the matter at the Lonely Mountain concluded?" she asked instead. Tarnis nodded and set the Soul Collector on her table. "Teacher Selin, can you increase the capacity of the Soul Collector?" Selin didn't press for details. After a moment's thought, she answered, "Not with its present structure. A Source Stone has a fixed capacity. You can't simply expand it. To increase capacity, you'd need a different, superior stone. But there's a simpler solution for your needs. Make several Soul Collectors using multiple Source Stones so you can carry more souls." Tarns's eyes lit up. "Then could you make more for me?" Selin chuckled and shook her head. "I can't right now. I only have this one Source Stone, but the Raya Lucarian Academy of Magic's warehouse stores quite a few Source Stones, and Caria Manor has countless ones. If you can summon either place to this realm, I can craft more Soul Collectors for you." Chapter 154, Ence's City. To get a Soul Collector with a larger capacity, I need to summon Raya Lucarian Academy or Carrion Manor. To summon Raya Lucarian Academy or Carrion Manor, I need a Soul Collector with a larger capacity. Are you trying to trap me in a loop? Tarn sighed and turned to Teacher Selin. "I understand. I'll sort out the Source Stone issue as soon as I can." Selin's glintstone mask tilted. "Also, sounds like you have a lot on your plate, my dear disciple." "Not too much, but not too little," Tarn said. "The short version is I need a huge number of runes. That will solve most of my problems. At the Battle of Lonely Mountain, the Soul Collector's limited capacity meant many dead orc souls couldn't be gathered. I took a terrible hit." Selin considered this. "If you urgently need souls to replenish Golden Grace runes, Would you consider those primitives in Eriador? They're isolated. If they were wiped out, no one would likely know. Tarns waved his hand away. No, absolutely not. Teacher Selen, drop that idea. Those primitives may be uncooperative, but they haven't provoked us. So, Selen said, if they provoke the golden tree, you'd act against them? Tarns rubbed his temple. Nor can we provoke them into doing so. I'll find a faster method. I'll come back once I secure the source stone. Selen, used to his moral stubbornness, simply nodded and turned back to her experiments. When Tarns led Melina out of Selen's chamber, the girl at his shoulder finally spoke. Selen really is a witch. Maybe only you can talk to her without losing your mind. Tarnish shrugged. Selen isn't as terrifying as the rumors. It's just that her worldview is unusual. Anyway, I have to figure out how to replenish runes fast and summon more royal army soldiers. If I can't, we won't have enough troops to garrison River Valley Town, let alone provide the patrols Nephili Lu requested. You said you killed those orcs to get souls when you replenished the Golden Tree's runes, Melina said. Yes, Tarns replied as they walked. Orcs reproduce quickly here. Kill a bunch and more show up. Melina glanced at the twin golden trees of royal capital Lendil in the distance, and at the other half, the Phantom Tree, and asked, You told me you summoned Freya from the Red Lion Legion using Phantom Grace. Do you have to use Phantom Grace to summon me and the royal capital Lendil? Tarns slapped his forehead. No, not necessarily. That reminds me, aside from summoning Freya, I haven't used the Phantom Tree's stored Phantom Grace for anything else. He walked a few paces beside Melina. You and I have been to the Land of Shadow, so we can accept things from there, but many in the lands between, even nobles, don't know the Shadowland's secrets. I never considered summoning things from there. Freya belonged to the Red Lion Legion, so she wouldn't raise suspicion. Melina snorted. Do you think nobles' heads are stuffed with golden grace like yours? The Phantom Tree is half of the Golden Tree. Its bright twin, standing where everyone can see it. Things from the Shadowland won't necessarily unnerve them. Tarns froze for a heartbeat, then glanced around to make sure no one was listening and muttered, The Phantom Tree isn't the problem. What happened in the Shadowland is. Think about what your brother Mesmer did for Queen Marika and what Queen Marika did at God's Gate. Those events can't be revealed now. At minimum, we should wait until the twin golden tree is complete before making anything public. If trouble breaks out, I can handle it then. Melina fell silent, then grudgingly admitted, All right, you were stubborn, but you thought of more than I did this time. Tarns smiled. No, thank you. You reminded me something else. Even if the Shadowlands events can't be revealed, its people can still be summoned. Melina brightened. What do you plan to do? I have a plan, Tarna said. Didn't Radon agree to let me station a contingent from Golden Tree territory at Lonely Mountain? We could send soldiers from the Shadowland there. If the teleport gate at Lake Town is tightly controlled and the Shadowland troops are kept far at Lonely Mountain, folks in the lands between won't be able to contact them immediately. So you plan to summon Mesmer? Melina asked, skeptical. But you said to summon a demigod, you often have to summon their landmark building first. You could send Mesmer and his army to Lonely Mountain, but you can't move Shadowland City there. Exactly. Tarns shook his head. Shadowland City holds too many secrets, unspeakable things within and beneath its castle. If people are summoned, they'll want to be stationed inside. I'm sorry, Melina, but I can't let you reunite with your brother this time. Melina shrugged. That's fine. Who from the Shadowland will you summon then? Aside from Mesmer's royal army, there aren't other forces loyal to the Golden Tree, are there? You're not thinking of that mad dragon on Spike Mountain and his kin, are you? Or Romina, the Maiden of the Bud tied to Scarlet Rot? She paused, frowned, and asked seriously, Or are you planning to summon that weak mad flame lord, Medela? Tarns hurriedly waved off the idea. Absolutely not. Remember when I summoned Lord Edgar of Moen and his daughter Irina? They were terrified of the mad flame. I can't summon Midra directly. Even if he's weak, he's still the king of the mad flame. If he burned my golden tree, where would I go? Melina's face softened. Good. Stop dodging and just tell me who you plan to summon. Tarns smiled. Mesmer himself can't be summoned because of the Shadowland's secrets, but the Two Moons Knight Lilana, who admires him, and her city, Ensis, are fine. He added, she was once a Carian princess and knew Radon, so having her guard Lonely Mountain won't be an issue. Melina considered that, then eyed Tarns. The question is whether the Two Moons Knight will be as friendly to the Golden Tree as your brother Mesmer. She will be, Tarns said. Even if not for the Golden Tree itself, she'll help me out of loyalty to Caria. Melina cocked her head. Why? Tarns went quiet. Melina's expression sharpened. Calm but dangerous, she asked. Is it because of your relationship with Lonnie? I don't remember everything after the tree burned, but in several cycles, I clearly remember you putting a ring on the demigod behind the Knight of the Black Knives. That means in the cycle where you said you walked the path of the stars, you were married to Lonnie? Tarnins could only nod. Melina said nothing for a moment, then briskened her pace. Tarnis hurried to keep up, words stuck in his throat. How could he explain? Melina had seen him slip the ring on Lonnie. What excuse could he offer? Saying he only had a cooperative relationship with Lonnie and truly loved Melina would only make things worse if Lonnie were summoned. He mulled over explanations and realized the only safe move was silence. Along the road, Storm Legion's soldiers, attendants, and maids watched Tarns trailing behind a radiant young woman, flustered and repeatedly starting and stopping his sentences. Melina didn't stop until they exited Stormvale Castle. She inhaled deeply, turned to face him, and Tarns froze, offering a sheepish smile. I was the first to give the ring, he blurted. Isn't Toretti's whistle ring-shaped? Melina muttered softly under her breath. He almost missed it. Did you say something? Ah, she sighed at his expression. Never mind, just personal grumbling. Or would your ears like to hear what kind of insect I'd compare your behavior to? If it helps, I can listen all day, Tarnis said, ducking. Mayflies live for a single day, she said, turning away. Are you trying to say your memory lasts one day too? Tarns hurried to deny it. Before he could finish, Melina pressed something soft into his hand. He looked down and found an exquisite cloth doll that looked, by his estimate, 80% like her. Melina turned back sharply. Keep it safe. If you lose it. Tarns pocketed the doll and swore solemnly, by the Golden Tree, I will not lose it. Melina hummed an approving then said, Summon Torita and head to royal capital Lanedell. You have business there. All right? They hurried back to royal capital Lanedell and stood beside the Golden Tree outside the Grand Cathedral. Without delay, they drew on the Phantom Tree's stored Phantom Grace and summoned Ensis City. Unlike previous summonings that bathed the area in golden light, the Phantom Tree registered no strange phenomena, only the pulsation of its black and gold trunk intensified. Tarns placed Ensis City near Shubard. He planned to summon Ryalu Carian Academy and Carian Manor later and wanted them nearby. Besides, Ensis City had Carian ties. It made sense to keep it within that sphere. Tarns also wanted to avoid putting Ensis directly adjacent to royal capital Lanedell or other pro-Golden Tree strongholds. Caria's relationship with the Golden Tree had never been straightforward. Stormvale Castle, at least outwardly, had submitted to the Golden Tree after defeat. Caria had been handled differently. The Golden Tree sought to resolve their conflict peacefully through marriage. Everyone in the lands between knew what Radon did later. He abandoned the Full Moon Queen and their children and returned to Lanedell to marry Marika. The Carian people, believing Radon a traitor who left his wife and children to become Elden Lord, bore deep resentment toward the Golden Tree. If Tarns summoned Carian buildings and soldiers too close to the Golden Tree's forces, tensions could erupt immediately. Placing Ensis a little farther away created a buffer, giving both sides time to meet without bursting into open conflict. Chapter 155, please take a leave and sort out the details of the outline. I'm taking a day off to refine some outline details. Today, I'm organizing Talion's materials, nothing as extensive as the Lonely Mountain arc, so this may become more of a transitional story in Volume 3 rather than a major focus. Volume 3 will concentrate more on the protagonist and the development of the Golden Tree. Chapter 150, Lalana, the Night of the Full Moon. Lalana, the Night of the Full Moon, and the Ensis City contingent she commanded gradually came into view before Tarnas and Melina. The former princess of Caria instinctively drew her greatsword the moment she spotted Tarnes. Suddenly, fragments of memory surged at her, and she pressed a hand to her visor while keeping the sword leveled at him with the other. The soldiers behind her tightened around their lord at once. At the front of the formation stood a tall troll in a Carian knight's helmet, and beside him Muletir, a Carian knight who gripped a deep blue greatsword with both hands. Both watched Tarns warily. "Enough, Muletir. Take the soldiers back," Lalanna said warily. "You would not be his match, and we are not necessarily enemies." Her words rippled through the ranks. Muletir hesitated for a few seconds, then gave a respectful nod. A pleasant female voice rumbled from beneath his helm. "As you command, my lady." The Ensis city troops obeyed without question and fell back, but Muletir and the troll did not rejoin the main body. They remained close behind Lalanna. She gave a small, approving motion, then removed her helmet. Beneath it was a soft, noble face, reminiscent of Queen Renala of the full moon, yet more heroic and lithe. Her black hair flowed down her back, and her tall, elegant posture did not falter. She sighed almost inaudibly and asked Tarns, "What should I call you, Tarnished or Elden Lord?" "Either is fine," Tarnas replied. "Both are part of who I am, but people here call me Tarnas. You can call me that." Lalanna nodded and allowed her gaze to sweep over Melina for a beat, shrinking slightly at the sight, before turning her eyes to the twin golden trees looming behind them and the clear blue sky beyond. For a long moment, she said nothing. The soldiers of Ensis City, summoned from another place, could not help but study the unfamiliar landscape. If not for their discipline, murmurs would have broken out. When she looked back down at Tarns, she asked quietly, "Tarns, this isn't the lands between, is it?" "You're observant, Lady Lalanna," he admitted. She looked around more closely and answered calmly, "Mesmer once invited me to visit the royal capital of Leyndell. I can recognize that church in the center of the capital, but this, a golden tree intertwined with a phantom tree, this is not right. The royal family of Leyndell would never allow a phantom tree in the lands between, and the sky here has never been this blue." She paused, then let out a deep breath. For those of us trapped in the land of shadow, being pulled out of that cursed place is already a blessing. But nothing comes for free. You must want something from us in return for bringing us here. I'm willing to listen, but on one condition. You must answer a single question. Tarns wondered why she accepted so readily. After all, he had not even shown her Lonnie's ring. While Lalanna thought of the Tarnished, she remembered, a man so powerful he had killed her 8 times. She had no wish to fight him again before finding Mesmer. If Tarns could pull her and her troops from the Shadowland, perhaps he could free Mesmer as well. How desperately she wanted to live under a normal sky with Mesmer, instead of guarding burdensome secrets in that yellow gloom. "Ask," Tarna said. Lalanna bowed slightly, pressing a hand to her chest. "Will what you ask of me endanger Mesmer? If your request makes me an enemy of Mesmer, I will give up this life without hesitation. I will not agree." Tarnas inwardly relaxed. He had feared something more cunning or political, but her question was blunt and heartfelt. He stepped slightly to the side so her bow would pass comfortably. By custom, she was his senior, and he could not accept such a bow directly, and answered with formal courtesy, "You worry too much, Lady Lalanna. I will need Mesmer's help later. I would not make you his enemy. That said, I cannot summon Mesmer at once." Hearing that, Lalanna's features softened. She straightened and, gratitude showing, said, "Your promise that I will be reunited with Mesmer in the outside world is enough for me. I ask nothing more. Tarnas, tell me what you want of me and the Ensis City troops." Tarns cleared his throat and gestured toward a small corner beside the church. "Can we speak privately for a moment?" Lalanna inclined her head to follow, but Muletir, restless and protective, called out behind her, "My lady, I will go with you. My instincts tell me this man is dangerous. I worry for your safety." Lalanna shook her head gently. "No, he is not a treacherous villain who deceives people. Besides, if he can free us from the Shadowland, could he not also send us back there if he wished?" Muletir remained uneasy. "But he has an attendant with him." Lalanna smiled faintly. "Then you should be even less afraid, Sir Muletir. That young woman is not merely an attendant. I know her." She glanced toward Melina as she spoke. "When I first met Mesmer, he introduced me to his sister." Chapter 157. Teacher, we have pyroxene. When Lalana followed Tarns to a secluded spot beside the Grand Cathedral, she found a small ring resting in his outstretched palm. It looked strikingly familiar. She had once owned an identical ring and later given it to Mesmer. A relieved smile escaped her. If Tarns wore Lonnie's ring, then his feelings toward Lonnie were genuine. At least he wouldn't be a troublemaker for Caria like some of the Golden Tree's people. Her expression, however, quickly shifted. Melina had been trailing behind Tarns in silence, and Lalana's glance flicked toward her. The way Melina looked at Tarns wasn't the look of an ordinary friend. Lalana knew that look. She'd seen it on her sister Renala's face when she looked at Radaon, the Golden Tree's hero. Suddenly, Lalana felt a throb of headache. The tangled relationships were dizzying. Melina was Mesmer's younger sister, and since Lalana was married to Mesmer, in theory, she and Melina were of the same generation. Yet Lani was Renala's daughter, and Renala was Lalana's sister, which technically made Lani Lalana's niece. As Lani's betrothed, Tarns was both a peer and junior by family ties. How on earth was she supposed to address him? Tarns noticed her momentary disorientation and asked with concern, "Are you all right?" Lalana blinked and shook her head. "I'm fine. I was just wondering what to call you." Tarns made a rueful face. "Didn't I already say? Call me Tarns." "Ah, no, not how I mean it," she said, exasperated with herself. After a resigned sigh, she gave up. "All right, Tarns it is." She had wanted to explain the knot of relations that had sprung to mind, but she realized the root of the confusion was her own situation. She had married someone younger and now found herself older than many people she'd expected to outrank. There was no point in overthinking it. Tarns and Lani were engaged, and whatever oddity there was between Tarns and Melina wasn't her concern. She would leave them to sort it out. Clearing her thoughts, Lalana asked, "So what favor did you want of me?" Tarnis set aside the lighter mood and explained the military business. Bard, the current administrator of Lake Town, no, River Valley Town, has asked the Golden Tree to send troops to garrison the area. That's why I summoned you and your forces from Ensis City. Since you and General Radon are both from Caria, posting your unit there will avoid making the Red Lion Legion feel like outsiders stealing a post. Lalana considered him for a moment and then nodded. "I didn't expect you to worry about the Red Lion Legion's pride. I have no objection. On behalf of Ensis City's soldiers, I'll accept the order to garrison Lake Town and River Valley Town." Tarnes continued, "You can use the teleportation gate now." "Ah, right. The gate is in Stormvale Castle. Take your army and follow me to Stormvale first. There's a gate there that will take you directly to Lake Town. If we're lucky, your unit and Radons can finish the handover today." "Very well," Lalana said. "One more thing. Did you summon Ensis City too?" Tarnas nodded and slapped his forehead. "Of course. Oh, did you want to go back to Ensis City first so your troops can pack their things? I hadn't thought of that. There's still time if you need it." "Thank you for thinking of us," Lalana said politely. He hesitated, then asked tentatively, "By the way, in Ensis City, do you have source stones?" Lalana's eyes widened. As one of Caria's more magically adept leaders, she knew exactly what source stones were for. She didn't know Tarns' purpose for asking, but she answered honestly. "Source stones are rare, but Ensis City still keeps a small stock." Tarnas brightened, trying to contain his excitement. "How many?" "If I recall correctly, there are 2 unused source stones in the city," she replied. Tarns could hardly hide his eagerness. "That's perfect. I can have Selen make 2 more soul collectors." He was already impatient. "Let's go to Ensis City right away." Lalana was puzzled by his enthusiasm, but didn't object. After all, Tarnis and Lani were engaged. She could treat the stones as a gift from an elder to the betrothed couple. "All right," she said, "lead the way." Chapter 158. The Plan. Tarns returned to Stormvale Castle from Ensis City, clutching the source stone he'd gotten from Lalana, and hurried to the room where Selen worked. He burst the door open, breathless. "Teacher Selen, I brought a new source stone." Selen looked up from the book in her hands and raised an intrigued eyebrow. "Oh, that fast. Where did you get it? Caria Manor or the Raya Lucarian Academy?" "If it's the latter, I still have some things there I never managed to reclaim." Tarns shook his head, hesitated, then said, "Neither, teacher. Have you ever heard of Ensis City?" Selen's brow creased. "Ensis City? Is that a city in this world?" Seeing she didn't know, Tarns gave her a brief account of the Shadowland and Ensis City. Selin listened, then spoke with interest. Fascinating. I may not know that city, but I do know the once famous Caria princess, Lilana. She vanished after abandoning her rank in the lands between to follow her lover. The academy was in an uproar back then. Many assumed she had been secretly assassinated by agents of the Golden Tree. Tarns felt a sourness at the mention of the Golden Tree, how often it seemed to bear blame. Selin caught the expression and chuckled. It's not unfair blame. When Caria and the Golden Tree clashed, both sides pulled no punches. That included the Black Knife assassins. Back then, many promising knights and glintstone prodigies from the Caria family were quietly eliminated by those killers. Later, Carian magic found ways to counterattack, and the assassinations stopped. Tarns's curiosity flared at the history he'd never known. Selin, though, waved him off lazily. If you want a proper telling, come alone next time. The affairs of Caria can't be summed up in 2 sentences, and I don't think the young lady behind you would enjoy an all-night lecture. Now, give me the Source Stone. Tarns glanced instinctively at Melina, who watched with calm composure. I'll wait out here if you need time. It'll take too long. Dinner will be cold, Tarns blurted, then visibly shivered and forced a smile. Selin chuckled at his nervousness in front of Melina. Tarns carefully handed the stone over. Selin took it and, with the casual air of someone who'd done this 1,000 times, set it on the table alongside another source stone she already had. How long until the new soul collector is ready? A few days? Tarns asked. Selin hummed and began drawing runes across the stones. Not that long. A few minutes. Tarns's eyes widened. That fast? Do you take me for a middling glintstone scholar, my dear apprentice? Selin said dryly. I've already solved the hardest part, going from nothing to a working soul collector. From there, it's just adapting the magic circle to the stone's properties. There, you can use this. She flicked one of the now etched stones toward him. Tarns awkwardly caught it with both hands, terrified of dropping or breaking it. Don't be so delicate, Selin said with a small smile. Source stones are sturdier than they look. They won't even chip if you drop them. If they were that fragile, we wouldn't use them to hold souls. Still, I understand being careful. Tarns hugged the stone close to his chest. Better safe than sorry. The collector determines how quickly I can summon people or objects from the lands between. Selin hummed in agreement, then handed him the other modified stone. Your caution now is funny, considering your fighting style, but it's sound. Research and practice both demand care. Tarnis thanked her and, before she could dismiss him entirely, ushered Melina out of Selin's book-filled room. The door closed and calm returned to the study. Melina looked at him, her eyes warm like amber. Tarns couldn't hide his grin. He now had 2 brand-new soul collectors. Tarns, what are you going to do next? Without thinking, he answered, Of course, I'm going to hunt orcs and collect their souls. He immediately looked a touch disappointed and muttered to himself, I don't know if the orcs who fell at the Battle of Lonely Mountain still have lingering souls there. After so many days, they might have dissipated. I hope some are still around. He rubbed his chin and continued thinking aloud. Where are the orcs congregating now? Bilbo has always lived peacefully. He wouldn't know. Maybe I should ask Thorin or Gandalf. Elrond would know. He used to lead Rivendell's patrols against nearby orc bands. I'll go to Lonely Mountain to find Thorin first, then to Rivendell to see Elrond. Bilbo will probably be back in Hobbiton by then. I can visit him on the way. It's a pity I don't know where Gandalf is. Tarnins, wake up. Melina's hand on his shoulder brought him back. He jolted, then looked at her apologetically. Sorry, Melina, I slipped into talking to myself again. She smiled and shook her head as if she was accustomed to it, then regarded him seriously. I told you some things last night, but I still don't quite understand your situation. Tell me what you need to do now. I want to help. Chapter 153, Searching for Orcs. Tarns readily agreed with Melina. An extra pair of hands would be far better than struggling alone. He led her to the City Lord Hall, where Nephili Lu was sitting at her desk. There wasn't much on her table, so she had time to tease them as they entered. It's rare to see you here, Tarnis. What brings you? Are you finally going to take my seat and run things for me? Tarns flushed a little, but Nephili waved a hand. I'm only joking. Stormvile's workload isn't so great. Aside from the manpower shortage, I can manage. It's Kenneth Haight at his fort who's a complete mess. You went and summoned Royal Capital Landell and shifted the fort's location again, didn't you? I'll keep an eye on him. He's been working hard. Maybe he deserves a reward, Tarn said. Nefili looked serious for a moment and held up a finger. Whatever you do, do not send weapons. Tarnas nodded. I'll remember. She watched Melina pull out a chair for Tarns and then sit herself, curious. So what brings you two to the City Lord Hall? Is there something you wanted to discuss with me? Tarnas gave Melina a quiet nod of thanks, then answered, No, we just wanted to borrow the room. I'm going to write down my plans, and Melina wants to see if she can help. May I see your plans? Nefeli asked as she set down her quill. Of course, Tarnas said. Some things might need your input later. But please, don't bring up manpower again. I'm already trying to address that. Nefeli settled opposite him. Tarns picked up paper and pen and began scribbling the ideas he'd been turning over. His notes were messy, quick jottings of action items. Melina was different. She asked him why each thing mattered, then took a fresh sheet and neatly transcribed his points, organizing them by priority. Nefili watched them working together, whispering now and then, sharing small smiles, and felt oddly redundant. You've been a great help, Melina. Thank you. Half an hour later, Tarns breathed easier, staring at the tidy list Melina had made. She shrugged modestly. It's nothing. When I studied, I used to sort and catalog everything. I'm good at this. Tarnas thanked her again, then nudged Nefeli, who had started to droop in her chair. Wake up, Nefeli. Weren't you going to look at my plans? They're organized now. Huh? Oh, you're done? Let me see. Nefeli snapped awake, rubbed her face, took the paper and read. A few minutes later, she handed it back with a sympathetic expression. You have a lot on your plate. Melina alone might not be enough. Some of these tasks could be passed to others, like this find orc gatherings item, but I don't have anyone to spare. Kenneth and Edgar are stretched thin too. Tarns tried to smile. They're things that can be handled by errands, not life or death matters. And I still have Millicent and Bernal, don't I? Nefili's eyes widened. That's the problem. There's a manpower shortage everywhere. Bernal and Egon, who came back with you, were taken this morning by Kenneth Haight and Edgar to put their skills to use. Tarns startled. What? Tell me more. I was bound up with Ensis City today and haven't kept track of them. If the Stormhawk hadn't told me another city had suddenly appeared, I wouldn't have noticed you summoned a carrion force, Nefili said. I only guessed from the architecture and the glintstones. I assume you stationed them in Lake Town? Tarnas nodded. Nefili tapped the table. Bernal spotted Kenneth and Edgar rushing about and stopped them. Otherwise, they might have been looking for you. They went to pull Bernal and Egon away because you moved Kenneth Haight's fort and Moan City. That's why they were frantic. Tarnas rubbed his forehead. Always the manpower issue. Once Radon's Red Lion Legion returns, Redmane Castle can help cover patrols in Stormvale, Kenneth Haight's fort, and Moan City. Nefeli shook her head. That would have worked a few days ago, but not now. You mean Landell needs people too? Tarns finished with a groan. We could seal Royal Capital Landell temporarily as an emergency measure, but it's not ideal. He then remembered Millicent. Since Bernal and Egon are gone, where is Millicent? Stormvale needs people the most, Nefili said, trailing off in a way that made the answer clear. Tarns understood at once. Please look after Millicent. The scarlet rot in her body was suppressed by the pure gold needle, but I still worry. Nefili was solemn. I will. Scarlet rot must be treated with care. After they exchanged more information about Stormvale, Nefili returned to her desk and her work. Tarns and Melina left the hall and headed for the market inside Stormvale, where visitors and traders from other realms clustered. He needed to find merchants representing Gondor nobles who had come to the Golden Tree territory. Gondor had a severe orc problem on its eastern border, and Tarns was in need of a large number of orc souls. Chapter 160, The Talkative Merchant. When Tarns and Melina stepped into the market inside Stormvale Castle, they immediately drew attention. Two human merchants who had been whispering nearby froze and started to argue in low voices. Isn't that the mysterious Lord of the Golden Tree? One hissed. Let me see. It does look like him. Just like that statue in the city, the other answered. I heard he helped the dwarves retake the Lonely Mountain. If he's here, does that mean they succeeded? Did they really kill Smaug? Or maybe they failed, the first said, eyeing Tarns's hurried expression. It was a powerful dragon. The Golden Tree forces could have been beaten back. From a dwarf stall, the dwarf shopkeeper who had been listening could no longer hold his tongue. He bellowed, "Shut it, or I'll ram my goblet down your throats, or toss you in my furnace. I won't stand for anyone bad-mouthing Lord Tarns." He threw his men and his strength into helping us dwarves. "Keep your mouths shut, or I'll smash your skulls with my hammer." The two human merchants jumped and quickly gestured for him to be quiet. Others nearby who had benefited from the Golden Tree's aid scowled at the merchants. It would take more than words before they felt comfortable trading in front of such hostile glares. Tarns noticed the commotion and walked over to see what was happening. "Lord Tarns!" the dwarf exclaimed. He thumped his chest, then offered a respectful salute. The two merchants, realizing who stood before them, trembled and did the same. A crowd gathered, partially curious and partially eager for a scene. Tarns glanced at the faces around him, then at the two merchants and asked, "What happened? I heard raised voices." The dwarf shopkeeper snorted and spat. "You tell him, since you were the ones running your mouths." The merchants dropped to their knees. Sorry, Lord. We were only being presumptuous about matters concerning the Lonely Mountain." The dwarf clicked his tongue, clearly not satisfied with that meek apology. Tarns suspected they had been saying insulting or careless things about him, enough to rile up the blunt dwarf. He watched the two merchants hesitate, then said, "Stand up and tell me plainly." Silence lengthened. If Tarns handled this poorly, it could hurt his reputation here. He held his silence just long enough to make the merchants more anxious. Then a squad of storm soldiers who had noticed the crowd pushed through. Their captain took in the scene, and when Tarns stepped forward, the captain's expression brightened. Tarns pointed at the merchants. "Find out where they're from. If they're Gondorians, all the better. I have a few things to discuss with the Gondor merchant convoy." The captain snapped a salute and ordered his men to disperse the onlookers. He politely asked the two merchants to present their entry papers. One of them did so, visibly pale. The thought that Tarns would speak with the convoy leader made him fear for his future. The storm soldier checked the booklets, then returned them and turned back to Tarns with respect. "Lord Tarns, shall I fetch the Storm Knight in charge of this market to accompany you?" the captain asked. Tarns shook his head. "No. Carry on with your patrols. No need to trouble them." He smiled at the soldiers. "Nefili Luke has been praising you for keeping the patrols running without complaint. Don't worry, more help will be coming. When that happens, I'll ask Nefili to give you a few days off." The soldiers brightened at the promise. The captain thanked Tarns, saluted Melina, and led his squad away. Tarns then turned to the two Gondor merchants and said evenly, "Take me to your convoy leader. I need to speak with him. As for your careless talk about me and the Lonely Mountain, that's not a trivial matter, but given the good relations between Gondor and the Golden Tree, I'll leave it to your convoy's spokesperson to decide what punishment, if any, is appropriate." "Yes, this way, please," they stammered, bowing and hurrying ahead to lead him toward the convoy. Before they left, Tarns addressed the dwarf. "The matter of the Lonely Mountain has been settled. You dwarves can go home. Word will take a little while to spread, so tell your kin early so they can prepare." The dwarf's hammer slipped from his hand with a clang, and he nearly dropped to his knees. His eyes were raw. He swallowed back tears, pounded his chest, and cried, "Lord Tarns, you are a friend the dwarves will never betray." Hearing that, the two Gondor merchants felt a rush of hope. The thought of the Lonely Mountain's legendary gold flashed through their minds. Knowledge like that could be worth a fortune. But the hope soured quickly as they realized their own loose tongues had likely cost them any chance of profiting from the news. They had no one to blame but themselves.